ReZero, Side Story, Pride, Prejudice and Zombies, Part 1.
A young man raced across the hill with desperation. Out of breath and his body drenched in sweat, the young man continued to run on the dark path without any regard to his appearance. Even with the branches grazing against his cheek and neck, leaving stinging red scratches, he wasn't bothered by it. At the moment, he was desperate. He was running faster than he had ever ran in his whole life. If he didn't, he would be caught. He would be caught. Caught by the things that he saw, caught by what caused him to abandon everything in order to escape. Caught by the faces he knew, but the things he didn't know. Damn it, damn it. Frustration and misery spilled from his lips, and bitter tears surfaced on the corners of his eyes. What crossed through his mind is the scenery of his dear old hometown, memories of the place he had just left behind. It was a rural area with nothing. He didn't like it. That's why he had left the moment he turned 15. Afterwards, he had wandered around from place to place, gaining experience from persevering in the face of adversity, and eventually became an adult. When he finally obtained a place where he could settle down, the thought of his hometown had suddenly occurred to him. His parents, who had been against him leaving his hometown until the end. His sibling, who had secretly given him his help during his escape from home. The girl who was his childhood friend, who had expressed regret when he bade her farewell. How could I have the nerve to think of that after such a long time, he had thought to himself, but his work was going smoothly. He could assume a defiant attitude and return in a triumphant mood. So, for the first time in years, the young man had set out for his hometown, and now, he was running in the mountains in midst of the darkness, whilst tasting blood in the back of his throat. Why did it turn out like this? What in the world could he do about it? What he only knew was that he could not leave that place, that area, that hometown all alone. He could not leave his family, his sibling, and his childhood friend, in such a sickening state. Someone has to do something. Keeping that thought in his heart, he continued to run. In the direction where the sun peeked in from between the mountains, he continued to run. As if in pursuit of the sun, he continued to run.
Part 2.
The Sun Princess of the Bariel Domain. The reason why Priscilla Bariel was admired by her people as such, was because of her nature and ability, as well as her shining beauty without any exaggeration. Formerly, the governing of the Bariel Domain was one that was oppressive towards its people. Like Bariel, Priscilla's husband and the man who died before the days of the royal selection, was not exactly incompetent, but he was a cold-hearted elderly man who seemed like he had an utter lack of compassion. Therefore, after his death, Priscilla, having taken over his duty of governing the territory, appeared as a savior to the people who were living in hardship. She was the sun itself, lighting up the darkness that they were shrouded in. That's why, as an indication of reverence, the people admired Priscilla as the Sun Princess. Personally, in the meaning of lacking compassion, it feels like Princess and Leipzig Summer are about the same. Leaning against the handrail in the corridor that connected two buildings, the man who gazed down at the mansion's entrance hall muttered to himself. He was someone who had a very eccentric, distinctive appearance, lightly dressed in coarse clothes over his reasonably trained body, wearing a type of unusual footwear known as zori, and missing his left arm from below his shoulder. He was what was called a one-armed man. However, what made him stand out even more than the fact that he was one-armed, would be the jet black steel helmet that covered his entire head, an eccentric outfit, a missing arm, and a helmet that hid his face. It was the person who Priscilla Bariel kept at her side and appointed as the role of a jester, Al. It sounded like an insult at one glance, but Al himself was pleased with being given the title of a jester. He preferred it over the position of being Priscilla's first and foremost knight, a position that would surely be the target of gossiping. It's not that he doesn't like Priscilla. He simply disliked the title of a knight. Knights were good-for-nothings, after all. Al, if anything, Princess is always welcome. She doesn't get angry when I stare at her cleavage, and also forgives me for it. Saying those kinds of things again, are you? I can just tell on mistress. Al, whoops. Al, having been talking to himself, turned around as he heard a teasing voice. Standing behind him was a girl, dressed in the red and white themed clothes of a servant. Al, oh, it's just you, Yay. You have bad taste, eavesdropping like that on someone who's talking to himself. Yay, though, I regret listening in because it was vulgar. Al, what I'm talking about right now is the problem with the eavesdropper's integrity. The topic of my integrity is for another time. Yay, eh? You're being unfair, saying that. The girl that reluctantly twisted about was Ye Tenzen, one of the maids that served Priscilla in the Bariel mansion, and also someone who would be a colleague to Al. With fair skin, slender limbs, and long red hair that was tied back, she was a beautiful girl, around 20 years old. Also being mischievous, she had eyes that gave the impression of a cat. As someone that was designated as the Grand Chamberlain by Priscilla, who took a liking to unusual things, she was one of the odd people. A glimpse of her oddness could be seen from how she quickly was able to accept Al's bizarre appearance, and how she could interact with him in a straightforward manner. Anyway, Al, the fellows down there all came here for Princess, right? They never quit, do they? While saying that, Al jerked his chin towards the entrance hall downstairs. There was the sight that Al had been previously gazing down at, which consisted of the people of the domain crowding around the mansion, with the servants having their hands full as they tried to handle the situation. Thinking normally, swarming around the mansion of the domain's lord in such large numbers could be considered as an act of an armed uprising, but, yay, the feelings of the people who bring gifts, and the feelings of the people who ask to see her just so that they could greet her. Because Mistress isn't the type of person to disregard these things, I also admire her as well, you see. Standing next to Al, Ye bragged as she watched what went on downstairs. Just as she had said, the people who were gathered at the entrance hall were not there out of ill will, but out of respect for Priscilla. As a matter of fact, the entrance of the mansion was lined with gifts that were delivered from all over the domain, and requests for an audience with Priscilla were flowing in endlessly. If the mansion of a person in power was accessible to the masses like that, it would inevitably sow the seeds of trouble. That was why the response towards the people who enter the mansion needed to be handled carefully. Al, despite all that, what's the Grand Chamberlain's intention of not handling the situation? In the name and for the safety of Princess, who you admire so much, isn't this the part where you should be working your butt off? Yay, but they keep coming one after another, and it doesn't look like there's an end to it. Also, Ye-chan only wants to work for the amount that she gets paid for. Also, it could be a good opportunity for the other maids to grow more professional. Al, which one's the truth, really? What a cunning maid. This was exactly what would be things said in the same breath. Seeing Ye's unabashed attitude on display as she stuck her tongue out, Al placed his finger on the welded part of his helmet, fiddling with the metal fittings and causing it to clang. It was a habit of his when he was thinking about something, but he found that he had been touching his helmet more often than he usually did. Al was aware that he was being nervous, as the royal selection had officially begun. Al, putting someone off their stride and playing with them is my specialty, but these days it's me who's being put off his stride, and it doesn't feel good. Yay, right, you're quite an honest person aside from his appearance. It's helpful because you're easy to interact with. Al, by that, you mean I'm easy to tease, right? Yay, dash. Is there a difference between the two? Al, it's scary that you think there's no difference. As Ye tilted her head to the side to indicate her curiosity, Al shrugged his shoulders with a shake of his head. However, it was somewhat of a surprise that he had been evaluated as an honest person, aside from his appearance. Keeping the fact that he was serving Priscilla in mind, it was difficult to accept it as a compliment. The parts of a human that the Crimson Girl saw value in were all ephemeral and ambiguous to the extreme. She wouldn't necessarily not cut his head off the moment she deemed Al as boring. Yay, even so, I think you're making light of Mistress a little too much. Al, for Princess, being scared of her is just about right. It was right after Ye saw through his inner thoughts despite being unable to see his facial expression, and his response to what she said about it. The area downstairs became abruptly loud, and Al's attention became focused on the entrance hall once again. As he wondered what the matter was about, the sight of a young man pushing his way through the line of the people caught his eye. Covered in sweat and coated in mud, he could tell that the young man was unclean at a glance. Since this was the mansion of the Lord of the Domain, the people were all dressed appropriately. That is the bare minimum of consideration that they are able to show, and the young man doesn't have it. Namely, Al, unless he's a huge idiot or lacks common sense. Yay, it's probably about something urgent that he needs to talk about, if he's in such a hurry. Replying in an easygoing manner, Ye stroked her own hair whilst narrowing her coal-black eyes. In that moment, seeing that the air of nonchalance around her had vanished, Al unconsciously touched the metal fittings of his helmet. Then, the ragged-looking young man arrived in front of a maid, and cried out, "Young man, please, let me meet the lord of the mansion. My hometown is being swarmed by living corpses." The young man's shout rang across the entire area, and silence instantaneously reigned over the bustling entrance hall. In the midst of it, the young man dropped to his knees, gasping for breath, and the tears that he could not hold back any further started falling onto the floor. Seeing the young man collapsed on the ground, as well as the droplets that rolled down his cheeks, "Yay, it seems like this is the type of request that mistress is fond of. I'll call princess over." Like that, against Ye, who had an unreadable smile on her face, Al let the clasp of his helmet make a metallic clang.
Part 3.
It was 4 days ago when I returned to my hometown. At first, because it had been a few years since I've returned home, I thought that was why my family was being distant towards me. Little by little, the young man, kneeling on the ground, started talking about what had happened to himself. The place he was currently at was not the entrance hall, but the large hall that was recently being increasingly used for audiences with the people of the domain. Inside the room, in which the floor was completely covered by a scarlet carpet, were the members of the Bariel domain's private army, the Crimson Battlefront. Each of them sported radiantly red equipment, and were lined up by the left and right walls of the room. In the hall that was dominated by the color of red, a girl, wearing a blazing red dress, was seated on top of a luxurious chair. It was the person that the color red suited the most in this mansion, Priscilla Bariel herself. While being exposed to Priscilla's blood-red gaze, the young man who came over to make a request was trying his best to explain the situation, continuing to speak falteringly. "Young man, what I thought as strange was the unnaturalness of the responses I got from them. Our conversations were inconsistent, and they were speaking about things that didn't match up with my memories." "Al, so you're saying that it can't be dismissed as forgetfulness. But, calling them living corpses because of that seems kinda wild." Like that, the one who poked at the young man's explanation was the only person concerned with the mansion who wasn't wearing the color red. Al, including the Crimson Battlefront that was standing at attention, the Grand Chamberlain Ye who stood behind Priscilla, and the young attendant who stood next to Priscilla, Shelt whose crimson eyes had gained her favor. Every person concerned with the large hall were donning red in a characteristic manner. Among them, Al's existence was an anomaly, having the appearance of a person who didn't belong there. Apparently, the young man had gotten the impression of that from Al, as he directed a questioning look towards him. "Young man, oh of course, that isn't just the cause of it. I saw a crucial moment." "Al, right, a crucial moment. What did you see?" "Young man, that is." The color draining from his face, the young man's gaze wandered around the hall upon being asked to elaborate. That was the expression of someone who was frightened by the memories in his own head, his body seized up with fear. Gasping out wordless breaths through his dried lips, the young man was unable to deliver his next words, or it was a reaction that was capable of withering his love for his hometown, along with his words. However, "Priscilla, do not fall silent there, commoner," said Priscilla with a glare towards the petrified young man, who came close to stopping himself from speaking. His shoulders were trembling from the callous tone of her voice. "Priscilla, shall you lose to your cowardice, your lips shall never move again. Enough of your conceitedness, seeking to depend on my mercy like that is utterly preposterous." "Young man, fierce words that were without a speck of kindness burnt the young man's cowering heart with its scorching heat. The next moment, seeing the gale that raged through his heart and the pitiful manifestation of his disappointment, Al harbored a sense of sympathy for the young man. So, Al shrugged his shoulders towards Priscilla, and called over to her with "Princess, Al, don't add insult to injury when he's this weakened. You can always put it another way, you know." "Priscilla, there is no another way to put it. there is only the truth. Listen, commoner. Sniffing disdainfully at Al, who tried to advise her on the matter, Priscilla crossed her arms in a way that put emphasis on her bountiful chest. Just like that, as she pierced through the rigid young man with her gaze, Priscilla, if you shall keep your silence, the risk you took whilst you ran day and night, and the regret you hold for your hometown that drove you to the point of doing so, shall all come to naught. Ask your heart if that is acceptable, young man. Priscilla, what? It is the hometown that you had abandoned once. Thinking no more of it for once and for all, and continuing to live your life could be considered as one decision. Whether that is to be referred to as wise, or referred to as cowardly is not my problem. Keeping the fierceness of her words, Priscilla unhesitatingly scorched the young man's heart into a burnt field. She didn't mind, even if it only left behind a pile of ash as a result. However, having received her smouldering words, the young man pushed open his eyes. Priscilla, so, what will you do? Are you a coward? Young man, a coward, I am. I'm not wise, either. What? I won't be a dastard. Against the question that was asked, the young man answered as he raised his head. As if she knew the answer from the very beginning, Priscilla showed her acceptance of it with a generous nod. As a result, Al's words were used as a stepping stone, and it made him feel like there was an itch in his stomach. That was why the impish grin that Ye was giving him provoked his annoyance. In comparison, Schult, who stood by Priscilla with a nervous look on his face, appeared more charming than that. Young man, during the night on the day I returned home, I couldn't sleep because the feeling that something was wrong was acting like a sore. Without even having a meal together with my family, I was laying down in my room. Then, I noticed someone leaving the house. It was as if they didn't want to be seen, so I became curious and chased after them, and, with an expression that projected his resolve, the young man resumed his explanation. Then, after a brief moment of hesitation, he let out the decisive words that cemented the issue in place. Young man, I saw villagers, with limbs that were falling apart, sewing them back together. Young man, at first, I thought I had mistaken it for something else, but that wasn't it. They were trying to stick their rotting arms and feet back onto their bodies, trying to restore it to the way it was before. I saw it going on, seeing something that shouldn't have been seen. In a story, there was only one path towards the end that was waiting for a witness like that. However, the young man had gone against the laws of storytelling, and was somehow able to escape from where it had all occurred. Young man, I stepped on a twig, and they found me. But I ran for my life and managed to get away, using the passage that led towards the mountains from the back of my house. Then, I kept running, and just like that, he had come to ask for Priscilla, the lord of the domain's help while completely out of breath. Yea, say, where did the topic of living corpses come from? Are you saying that they called themselves that? Young man, long ago, there was the story of dead bodies moving around and attacking people near my hometown. Because of that, when parents would scold their children, they warned them that the living corpses were coming. That's why, yea, what you thought was a superstition actually showed up. You came to that conclusion, I see, by calmly pointing out the steps that the young man's conclusion skipped over. Ye added supplementary information to it. Once that was done, she casted a glance at Priscilla's face from the side, before closing her mouth. Similarly, Al said nothing. They understood that Priscilla must be the one to decide on what to do with the young man's appeal. Nonetheless, there was someone present in the room, someone that was unable to take on a rational point of view like them. Schult, Priscilla Summer, calling for his master with a feeble voice. The one who focused his watering eyes on her was Schult. The young, kind-hearted boy was sympathizing with the words of the sorrowful young man, seeking mercy from Priscilla. That was a request that could incur Priscilla's displeasure, and bore the danger of receiving judgment for it. However, when Priscilla looked at Schult, she slid her fingers in between the locks of his pink hair, caressing him. She caressed him, and said nothing. Just with that one action, a relieved expression appeared on Schult's face. Priscilla, and then, what do you desire from me? You have informed me that your hometown has been swarmed by living corpses, and have delivered the report of an ongoing crisis. What do you seek in return? Young man, please, take back my hometown. No. Biting his lip, The young man shook his head. He had attempted to seek hope in Priscilla's question, and realized of his own accord that it was a plea that lacked reality. Priscilla wasn't the type of person who would try to grant a hopeless wish. At the moment, the answer that she was looking for wasn't an intangible pipe dream. What already happened can never be changed. No matter what or who, it was an act of pride that could never be forgiven. So, the young man did not ask for her to save them. Young man, please, destroy the living corpses. My hometown. My family, my sibling, my childhood friend. Please put them to rest. I ask of you. Lowering his head, the young man spoke of his wish, one that was sorrowful but required determination in order to be said. Hearing it, what sort of answer will Priscilla return? Peeking at his master from the inside of his metal helmet, Al already knew with a single glance. Everyone inside the room who served her understood as well. It was because Priscilla had sadistically loosened the corners of her red lips, putting on a smile of satisfaction.
Part 4.
The young man's hometown, Coffleton, was one of desolate villages that were located at the southernmost area of the Barriel domain. True to the words of the young man, who had said that he became tired of how empty it was, the village had no distinctive features. The preconditions were also different from Ladrimer, another village that Priscilla had visited in the past. During that time, Priscilla had been after Ladrimer's specialty, which were bright red flowers that were known as kuranai. However, unlike Ladrimer, Coffleton didn't have a single alluring aspect to it, so, as one of the strange incidents that were commonplace within the domain, it could have been easily dealt with just by sending a part of the Crimson Battlefront, but, Al, I wonder why it turned into a visit from Princess herself, yet again. Inside the dragon carriage that was being pulled by a scarlet earth dragon, Al grumbled as he looked up at the extravagant interior. Under the effect of the divine protection of wind evasion, the carriage was exceedingly cozy due to it neither feeling the wind, nor shaking from the speed it was running at. Provided that Al wasn't very enthusiastic about the trip, a road with no inconveniences was extremely inconvenient to him. In front of Al, who had rather strong feelings towards the trip, Priscilla closed one of her eyes with a what? Priscilla, are you dissatisfied with my decision? Quite a recklessly daring one you are, Al. Al, why does one complaint make me be treated as a reckless person? Aren't I being treated harshly these days, Priscilla, fool? My view on everything is always just. If you feel that you are being treated as such, then that is because your services only amount to it. Shifting the blame onto me. Now, that is the height of idiocy. Elegantly recrossing her long legs, Priscilla covered her mouth with a fan that she pulled out from her cleavage. Waving his hand at the gesture with a sure, Al, actually, doesn't having the Lord of the Domain herself come over, without even bringing her private army seem like a bad move? Well, if we're against ordinary villagers, then they might grovel in front of your authority. But, from what we've heard, we're against zombies, right? I wonder if exercising power over those sponge-brained people will really work? Priscilla, once again, you have used words that I do not know of. What do you mean by zombie and sponge? Al, dead bodies that walk around are called zombies. A sponge is, how to put it, an item you use when washing the dishes. To put it simply, I meant that it's all dry and crappy. Priscilla, Setting aside sponge, I like the sound of zombie. Loosening the corners of her lips in a good mood, Priscilla narrowed her blood-red eyes. Priscilla, so, you were saying why I opted to visit the place. Can you not imagine why, Al? The only reason I can think of is because you found it interesting. Is there a different reason, Priscilla? Perhaps. Indeed, the reason that comes first is because I found it interesting. However, that is not the only reason. Until the issue is resolved, you shall gauge my intentions. If you are not able to obtain an answer before it is resolved, expect your treatment to become worse. Al, what's that, a quiz? If a penalty for it exists, then I would like it if there's a reward as well. Priscilla, how rapacious. Fine, then. When you have successfully ascertained my intentions, I shall let you lick my feet. Al, is that your latest trend or something, princess? I'm starting to wonder if I should really lick your feet. Is that a reward or a penalty? It would be a reward for those with peculiar interests, but fundamentally, it would be a type of punishment. Though, if he thought of it as being able to be near Priscilla's feet, then Al could try his best to picture it as a reward. I apologize for having to interrupt the suggestive conversation between you both, but, like that, there was the voice that hesitatingly wedged itself between the exchange between Al and Priscilla. The voice came from Ye, seated next to Priscilla inside of the carriage during the whole time. Raising her hand slightly, she put on a flippant smile and tilted her head in a blandishing manner. Ye, why have you taken me with you? Usually, you would have a flower on each arm with Shulchan and Alsummer. One is a carnivorous plant, but it would be like that under normal circumstances. Al, a carnivorous plant. No, there's still the possibility that Shulchan could be that one, although just barely. Yay, of course you're the carnivorous plant. I gave you a gentle and lenient rating. Al, right. While his shoulders were sagging from Ye's merciless evaluation of him, Al inwardly had the same doubts that she held. This time, Priscilla did not bring Schult with her on the trip to Coffleton. It was a rare thing for her to do, as she usually had him follow her around wherever she went. It was the first time that she brought Ye from the mansion instead of Schult. Ye, to begin with, I was only hired by Master. Although he is now deceased, I was hired by him as a waiting maid of the mansion, in order to serve Mistress. My situation right now kind of feels like working outside of what I was contracted to do. Priscilla, in other words, what? Are you saying that you wish to resign, because you have received treatment that is unfitting of your terms of employment? Yay, I never said that much. It's just that I prefer to not work outside of my hours and contract from my standpoint, so if that was to be imposed on me no matter what, Priscilla, you would like to be granted a reward befitting that, yes? Do not be worried. I reward the efforts of the common people. After all, it was my decision to have you accompany me. You think that I would deceive you? For a moment, the air inside the carriage smelled as if it was being burnt, and Al stiffened his body in response. Intimidated by Priscilla's low voice, Ye's cheeks hardened slightly as well. However, Ye immediately returned to her usual self, placing both of her hands on her cheeks, and, Ye, not at all. No way, no way. Surely not. How foolhardy it is to doubt you. All I did was state my position. If you say so, then there's no problem. I am your faithful dog. I will gladly water your precious flowers, as well as your carnivorous plants. Al, just saying, but if you don't properly feed bugs to carnivorous plants, there's research data stating that they'll be evidently weaker than if you only gave them water. Priscilla, cease your interference, Al. There is no current need for your knowledge of carnivorous plants. Well then, Ye. If you had a change of heart, you shall show that with your actions. As for Coffleton, what about it? Reproving the grumbling Al, Priscilla threw over a broad question towards Ye. Then, Ye grabbed a bundle of her red hair, and while tickling the ends of it against her lips, Ye, there isn't information in particular that I can give you. The man who informed you about the living corpses is Array Dinkutz. He's the second son of Karen Dinkutz and Monet Dinkutz, and the eldest son is Riddle Dinkutz. Maybe that's all. There isn't anything remarkable about the village, so, I'm sorry that I could not be of any help to you, she added as an apology, but what she said was worthy enough of astonishment. Of course, it wasn't as if she made an arbitrary statement. It was all based on the truth. In every town and village within the domain, surveys were held in order to grasp the number of residents, as well as their names. Naturally, those records would be delivered to the lord of the domain, Priscilla. However, Ye, the Grand Chamberlain, had readily breathed out the needed information as if she knew it all. Those that are competent would be used accordingly. She was a mysterious girl, but that was why Priscilla had given her a position that required responsibility. Ye, it looks like we arrived. Once the conversation came to an end, the dragon carriage gradually came to a stop. When the driver, who was holding the reins, opened the door of the carriage respectfully, a cool breeze greeted the three's visitation. Then, there was nothing else that was decent enough to be called a welcome. Al, as far as I can see, there's nothing but farms and fields. Yay, because it's that kind of place. There's only 88 villagers, and it's narrower than the mansion. More like narrower than the grounds of the mansion. Gazing down at the village from the top of a hill, Al and Ye exchanged their impressions of the scenery of the rural area. It sounded nice if it was proclaimed as verdant and pastoral, but a single glance at it was enough for those looking at it to perceive it as a desolate village, a place that was too monotonous for the young people. It was understandable why the young man had abandoned his hometown. Al, there are so few houses, and they're tiny and arranged close to each other. But, pausing mid-sentence, Al observed the village from a distance. It was relatively far, but the village's activities of daily life could still be seen from where he was. Smoke drifted into the air from where they were cooking their meals, and there were people who were walking around the village. A rumor such as it being occupied by living corpses seemed terribly contradictory to what it looked like. Al, though, it looks like a normal village right now. The zombies that I imagine don't seem like they would cook or do the laundry like that. Yay! 40 years ago, the corpse soldiers that raged through the kingdom of Lugnaka were apparently not in a state where they could live an ordinary life. While their bodies continued to rot, the only thing they did was to keep attacking the living. But, corpse soldiers of strong people were said to have been strong as when they were alive. Receiving Al's words, Ye replied with the knowledge that she had garnered from picking up bits and pieces of it. Either way, being bossed around even after death sounded like a horrifying thing to experience. Al, well, it could be worse, because at least they get to die. If their minds stopped working, then they probably wouldn't be aware of their misfortune. So, Ye, that's quite the funny assumption you have there. As Al touched the metal fittings of his helmet while in deep thought, Ye directed a jeer at him. Without answering to it, in order to figure out what they were doing next, Al turned to Priscilla, who stayed silent the entire time. Al, there's the possibility that the young man who came to the mansion might have been out of his mind. Maybe we should have investigated him instead. Princess, Priscilla. There was no response to his call, and Priscilla remained silent as she stared at the desolate village below. However, what dwelled in those blood-red eyes was intense loathing, and a rage that had developed into shimmering flames. Her emotions had been lit ablaze by her convictions, something that was obviously different from what Al and Ye were feeling. Priscilla, I could care less about who they are or where they are from, but to induce disorder beneath me in this manner. Curling her lip, Priscilla left those words as she promptly started walking. Seeing her walk with an unwavering gait made Al and Ye take a moment to register it, before they hurried to catch up to her. Al, hey, Princess. I understand that you're flipping mad, but why so sudden? Priscilla, you shall understand if you look. You shall scent if you smell. If you strain your ears, you shall hear the degenerates that are manipulating their strings, playing with dolls. All of that, shall I deem as an act of insolence against me? Al, everything doesn't make any sense. Priscilla's way of speaking was hard to understand, and it took time for Al to simplify her words inside of his head. And now, Priscilla was walking very quickly, so she wasn't giving him enough time to do so. Descending from the hill with a confident air, Priscilla entered Coffleton, the village in question, without a single falter in her steps. Noticing Priscilla and her two companions, the man who stood at the entrance of the village raised his brows. Man, oh, how rare it is to have visitors from the outside. With a dress like that, what did you come to the village for? Priscilla, silence. Raising his hand lightly, the man who had spoken to them in a friendly tone opened his eyes wide. The next moment, with the crimson-treasured sword that Priscilla drew out from empty space, the man was cut down diagonally from the shoulder. Man, KH. A short cry escaped the man, and his body was enveloped in flames soon after. The yang sword that Priscilla possessed was one enhanced sword that incinerated everything it slashed. Remaining alight, the flames of hell would ignite the very existence of those that it came into contact with, until nothing but ashes were left. As if to prove that, the man's body was transformed into cinders, and, Al, whoa, whoa, whoa? What the hell? Burning the first villager to death. Yay, to be exact, I think he was slashed to death, but it seems like it doesn't really matter no matter which one it is. Witnessing the act of violence that occurred right in front of them, even Al and Ye were unable to hide their bewilderment. However, Without so much as a glance towards the bafflement of her companions, Priscilla sniffed disdainfully at the blackened corpse of the man. Priscilla, a zombie shall not speak to me so unceremoniously. I grant my protection to the people, however, it is not as cheap for me to grant it to a counterfeit such as yourself. Know your place, Al, but he was talking, and he also had a sociable smile. Is he really a zombie? At the very least, Al viewed the man that was burnt to death as a human. To add to that, he had categorized the man as a friendly human, so it could only be described as a tragedy for him to be killed like that without question. Yea, I'm going to repeat that I think he was slashed to death. The other villagers, next to Al who held his head in his hands, Ye's cheeks twitched as she looked around. Surrounding the three were the villagers who were murmuring amongst themselves, having shown themselves after noticing the presence of the unfamiliar visitors. Priscilla had made incredibly quick work of the man, so they hadn't caught sight of the fate of the first villager. Though, there was a human-shaped chunk of ash lying around, so it was only a matter of time until they comprehended what had gone down. Yea, everyone, this is, in order to find a way to say something that would gloss over the situation, Ye racked her brains for an excuse. However, Al had understood Priscilla more so than her, at least by a small margin of half a step. Al, Prince, Priscilla, humph. Even with half a step, he was unable to come close to Priscilla, who was already far ahead of him. The villagers had sealed their fate the moment they came by defenselessly. With a ruthless flash of Priscilla's yang sword, the small elderly man that stood at the front was mowed down, bursting into a blazing fire soon after. Beholding the abrupt display of murder just before their eyes, the villagers plunged into a state of panic. However, the scream immediately quieted down. The man who let it loose had been decapitated, his scream cut off. Priscilla, see, Al. The man had given an accurate report. Al, what's accurate? Right now in progressive form, I can't think of this as anything else other than a scene where the higher-up, who made a wrong decision, loses their mind and goes around shutting people up. Priscilla, for what reason, is there not a single woman nor child present at this place? Where is the reason for us to be encircled by nothing but well-built men? Twirling her crimson sword in her hand, Priscilla shoved the tip of the blade against the chest of the headless man. Naturally, with the impact of being pushed backwards focused on its upper area, the body did not topple over. The reason why there was no blood coming out of the surface of the severed neck was because the yang sword had cauterized the wounds that it created, but that wasn't all there was to it. Wriggling a part of itself, the headless body attempted to lay its hands on Priscilla. Al, clicking his tongue, Al forcefully tackled the headless man. Without his head, the man was easily sent flying, but he repositioned himself by landing on the ground with his hands and feet. Al, yuck. Looking squarely at the surface of the severed neck, Al voiced his disgust at the nauseating sight. Squirming around at the man's wound were tentacles that resembled the countless roots of a plant. Like weeds that danced around underwater, the writhing appendages prevented Al from making a move, and lunged at him not before combusting. Priscilla, do not think that you will remain safe when you have made physical contact with the edge of the yang sword. Burn to ashes, counterfeit. In front of Priscilla, who had spat those words at him, the man let out a muted cry of death as he disintegrated into a pile of cinders. In the meantime, the surrounding villagers did not run away, but were staring at the foreign enemy with eyes devoid of human emotion. Registering that Priscilla's intuition was unquestionably correct, Al unsheathed his blue dragon sword from the back of his waist. Al, damn it, those really are zombies. Stay back, princess. Priscilla, I shall leave it to you. I have had enough of these begrimed filth entering my field of vision. Al, Are you serious? While trying to look good, his expectations of Priscilla helping him to get rid of the zombies were tossed out of the window. Once Priscilla actually put her sword away into the sky, she patted Al on the shoulder and stood behind his back. Like that, Al was dealing with more than 30 expressionless living corpses. Al, I'm gonna die from this, aren't I? Yay, hey. Al Summer is so cool. This is where you should show us your manliness. If you were to be extravagantly bitten to death, I'll tell Schultz-chan that you died nobly. Al, stop messing around and help me. Yea. Assuming a stance with his blue dragon sword, Al barked at the Grand Chamberlain that was cheering him on half-heartedly. As if on cue, the man at the front holding a farming tool took a swing at Al with it. Then, a black blade penetrated straight through the man's forehead. The man halted his steps, his neck rearing backwards from the force. However, his head bounced back like a spring, and he resumed his action of trying to land a hit on Al with his farming tool. Hacking off both of the man's arms with the blue dragon sword, Al immediately cleaved through his neck, torso, and knees with a returning strike. Al, finally, one down. After doing this much, I'm already feeling overwhelmed. Aren't my skills too ineffective against these energetic people? After Al finally silenced one zombie whilst breathing heavily, Ye directed a pout towards him. A black knife, the same kunai that was sticking up in the man's forehead, was held firmly in her hand. Kunai were daggers that were unique to the West, and she had many more weapons that were hidden under her red-made uniform. Hence, her true worth as Priscilla's maid was her ability to fight. It couldn't be helped that one would be complaining over the current circumstances. Ye's style of fighting consisted of attacking vital spots after ambushing the opponent, which was completely ineffective against zombies, as neither their heads nor hearts served as proper weak points. Al, princess. Hey, princess, Priscilla, do not chatter as if you were a bird. You are degrading my preeminence. If you are my attendant, you shall remain dignified. Al, can't you see for yourself with those pretty eyes? I'm gonna die from this. Hey. While vocalizing his complaints, Al went on to cut down one, then two zombies, making his way through in the midst of the enemy whilst being prepared to die. Trying to pass through the zombified villagers, who were attacking him all at once, felt like he was trying to search for a way out of a fatal situation. Even so, it was only a matter of time until he was overpowered by the difference in numbers. And yet, Priscilla seemed to enjoy watching Al's desperate struggle, and, yay, Al Summer, do your street. The only thing I can also do is to cheer you on. Al, shut up. For some reason, Ye was throwing words of encouragement at him as if she had nothing to do with it, so Al yelled at her to cut it out. With two people who weren't facing the situation properly behind his back, Al's unprecedented fierce battle went on. It was after several tens of seconds that Priscilla drew out her yang sword once again, in order to save Al, who was actually about to die.
Part 5.
Al, still, to think that it was a zombie village for real. Muttering to himself, Al used his foot to turn over the corpse of the villager that he had cut down. The face the villager made was far from a peaceful one, but all he could do was pray for him, because, unlike regular bodies that fell victim to bladed weapons, the body that laid in front of him was in a gruesome condition, covered in deep gashes and having been hacked into pieces. The damaging of a corpse to this extent, which one would suspect that a lunatic was responsible for, was definitely not a common sight. Without doubt, Al did not intend to chop the villager up, and he had the excuse that he did it out of necessity. Al, to begin with, there's 10 times the amount of burnt bodies compared to bodies that were slashed apart, so I don't even need an excuse for that, Al said, looking around at his surroundings to find that there were piles of burnt bodies all over the place. While fighting back against the wave of villagers, the body count had eventually climbed up to 50, but 90% of it were burnt bodies, and the number of villagers that Al cut down ended up amounting to close to nothing. During the middle phase of the battle, Al was only able to cheer for Priscilla's crimson sword dance together with Ye. That was the most optimal solution, as the villagers that were turned into living corpses had an abnormal amount of vitality, and they were moving around freely even after their weak points, such as their necks and hearts, were crushed. By chance, the zombies were defenseless against the flames of the Yang sword, and killing them in any other way required the cruelty of chopping them up, their abnormal vitality, and how they looked like when they were burnt into a crisp. They were increasingly becoming similar to the zombies that Al knew of, even having similar characteristics. Furthermore, labeling them as parasites sounded like it would fit them more, rather than simply referring to them as zombies, but, I'll call them zombies so that it's easier to understand. Anyway, true to Princess's observation, there aren't any zombies of women and children. Unless they're secretly made into food inside the village. Yay, please stop thinking of scary things like that. believe it, I went looking for them properly. While Al was comparing the faces of the blackened corpses with what was inside of his memories, Ye, who left to check out the village by herself, came back after being done with it. She made a grimace at the words that Al muttered out, then gestured behind her back with a hand. Standing there were the women and children, who were all likely to be residents of Coffleton. Yea, during the day, each one of them were apparently made to stay inside of the sheds and warehouses of their houses. According to them, monsters that looked exactly like their family were forcing them to keep living normally. To be honest, that was a rather disturbing demand to make. Even if the zombies were identical to the family members of the villagers, what was inside them would still be entirely different. To add to that, they had ordered the remaining villagers to act like everything was the same. Al could only think, are you in any position to make those demands? However, all the villagers could do was to obey. To make matters worse, because the zombies' limbs were falling apart, they were also forced to sew them back on. Al, I thought I was pretty resistant against these kinds of topics, but Yay, I can't see your face because of your helmet, but I can't work in an environment where my co-workers could look at this without batting an eye, because it's too scary. So, it's all right even if you're afraid, Al Summer. Al, it's not like I was afraid. Though, it is a horrifying thing. Whilst smiling, Ye uttered something that sounded like she was trying to console Al, who cracked his neck in response. Like that, Ye directed a stare at him that said, "What do we do?" Indicating the question of how they were going to deal with the villagers. What Ye was concerned about was how they were going to inform the villagers of the fates of their family members. On top of being turned into zombies, they were charred into piles of ashes. Did Al and Ye ought to tell them the truth? Having encountered a difficult problem that he hadn't really imagined happening in his life, Al wordlessly fiddled with the metal fittings of his helmet. But I see. So, those are the survivors of the village. Priscilla, who had returned to the dragon carriage that was left on top of the hill, came walking in. As she fixed her gaze on the survivors, Al hastily grabbed her shoulder with a princess. Al, I know how you feel. But, bear with it. If we tell them that you gleefully disposed of the guys, the women and children will go into a frenzy, and we're going to end up having around 20 more burnt corpses. Priscilla, who do you think I am? Do you believe that I, to the wives who have lost their husbands, to the children who have lost their fathers, and to the sisters who have lost their brothers, would thrust the truth in front of them and laugh about it? Al, truth be told, he really thought that she would, but he swallowed back his words before they came out of his mouth. In the meantime, Priscilla moved towards the survivors of the village. In front of them was a girl who stood aimlessly, glancing at Priscilla and mustering up the courage to ask, "Girl, is Array safe?" Al, Array, yay, he's the man who came over to the mansion to give a report about this. Array Dincuts. As Al tilted his head at the name of the person that the girl asked about, Ye reminded him about it by whispering into his ear. That was the name he had heard while he was in the dragon carriage, still on his way to Coffleton. If the girl was that worried for the safety of the young man, then, Priscilla, certainly. Are you the one who let that one escape from the village? Girl, all I did was distract the imposters. But, I'm glad that he's safe. Breathing out a sigh, the girl appeared relieved from the bottom of her heart to hear of Array's safety. She was genuinely worried, to the point that she was willing to tread on dangerous ground for him. However, as a result, the girl's actions had ended up informing Priscilla of the surreptitious invasion of the living corpses. Priscilla, I shall grant you a reward. Come, girl, Yes, approving the contributions of the girl, Priscilla beckoned the girl to come closer. While showing her puzzlement from being addressed in such a pontifical manner, the girl took one step towards Priscilla. Priscilla, do not bite down, girl, The next moment, without hesitating even for a second, Priscilla stole the girl's lips. Their first meeting, with no explanation, and between two women jumping over those factors with a single breath, the villagers at the back were taken aback by Priscilla's sudden move, one that could be considered as violence if looked at from a different angle. Of course, they weren't the only ones who were flabbergasted. Al, hey. What the heck is going on? Yay, HK. Al Summer, Al, yeah. What? Wait, whoa, as Al looked to have a debate on what the definition of a reward was, Ye called out to him. Right after he knitted his brows from the call of his name, Priscilla let go of the girl's lips, whilst biting down on a grotesque tentacle with her teeth. Immediately, Priscilla dragged the appendage out of the girl's body. About 1 meter long, the tentacle thrashed around, attempting to slam the razor-sharp tip of its body against Priscilla, Al, or Ar, but it was blocked by Al's blue dragon sword. With one strike, the tentacle that appeared as thick as the roots of a tree was halved without difficulty, and it started wildly tossing around on the ground. Like a fish out of water, it seemed as if the tentacle was desperately struggling to survive. Priscilla, however, you are not deserving of life. With those words, the thrashing tentacle was lit ablaze by her treasured sword. In a similar fashion as the zombified villagers, the appendages fell still the moment it was burnt into a crisp. Al, so, this is the essence of the zombies. They're parasites. No, parasitic creatures? Al gulped as he saw the ashes of the tentacles that laid on the ground, feeling repulsed by the sight of it. He recalled the foreign substance that was crawling around on the severed surface of the headless man from earlier. It meant that the same things that were inside the zombified men were also rooted inside of the women and children. However, the girl hadn't turned into a zombie. What was the difference between them? Yea, it might depend on their constitution, or their blood. Or, simpler than that, maybe they just can't control the bodies of women and children. Priscilla, nevertheless, perhaps they prey on them in order to rise up onto land. Truly hideous, Priscilla spat out, narrowing her eyes at Ye, who looked after the girl that was in a coughing fit. She then reversed the position of the yang sword in her hand, and took a swing at the cowering villagers. Immediately, the survivors collapsed and all of them began vomiting onto the ground. While Al was dumbfounded by what was going on in front of him, Priscilla directed a grunt towards him. After that, when she gently caressed the blade of the scarlet sword that she held, Priscilla, my yang sword cuts down those that it wishes to cut down, and burns those that it wishes to burn. Al, you mean, you only cut and burnt the tentacles inside their bodies? Priscilla, you are quick to understand. I shall praise you for that.
Al, for a second, I thought you also chopped up the survivors, so I was worried stiff.
Anyhow, if Priscilla's yang sword wasn't available, they would have probably had to do something like that. Even worse, they would have to kiss every single survivor, and drag the parasites out of them. Al, though, the reward was a kiss from Princess, huh? For my reward, instead of making me lick your feet, that kind of thing is fine by me. Priscilla, fool. It is true that my lips are a glorious treasure. However, what I meant by reward were their lives. As a result of that one prioritizing emotion over survival, this entire ordeal was brought to light. It is an undeniably commendable effort. Breathing out a sigh at Al's words, Priscilla gave high praise to the girl's actions. Al, so, a girl's love managed to stop a tragedy. That sounds too good to be true, but I'm glad that there wasn't any more damage than this. Priscilla, no, it is too soon to be feeling relieved. Priscilla shook her head at the conclusion that was given to the extent of the damage done against Coffleton, rejecting the idea that it was over. Having caught the note of assertiveness in her voice, Ye momentarily stopped checking up on the villagers and turned around. Ye, does that have something to do with the dragon carriage that left, after Mistress ordered something to the driver? Priscilla, certainly. I have directed the dragon carriage towards the Crimson Battlefront at the mansion. They are heavily equipped, and I have given them the command to conduct investigations at 3 separate villages, near the basin of the Tenril River. While answering the question, Priscilla spread out her scarlet fan, pointing it at the river that flowed beside the village. Realizing the true meaning behind Priscilla's gesture, Al and Ye shuddered at the implications that were made. Ye, so, Mistress believes that the river is the source of infection. Al, from what little I know, it's a given that those that get bitten by zombies get infected, though, Priscilla, those did not have the habit of biting its hosts. In addition to that, they were making the effort to blend in, correct? Al, that's true. That was the difference between the zombies that Al knew, and the villagers that were controlled by the parasitic creatures. They weren't trying to initiate violence, but they were trying to take the place of the original villagers, and were attempting to protect their own territory. It was as if they were not after the bodies of their victims, but their entire lives instead. Al, if that's what it is, then parasites are not very nice at all. Priscilla, do make sure that you never drink from the river. If possible, do not even touch it. The crops that were grown using the river water must also be burnt up. Al, you're being thorough about this. If so, we should also be careful of the bugs at the water's edge, 'cause blood-sucking bugs are common around those areas. I often heard about diseases being spread by bugs. Priscilla, in any case, with a low voice, Priscilla narrowed her blood-red eyes, then made a pause. Instantaneously, a chill raced up Al's spine. No, it was something similar to that, but it was not a chill. It was not cold, it was hot. A scorching heat brushed against his spine as it passed through. A burning smell flickered across his nostrils, a smell that he recalled catching a whiff of in the dragon carriage. The air that encircled Priscilla Barriel was the telltale sign of her judgment, of her decision of what to do against the ones responsible for wreaking havoc upon her land. In other words, Priscilla, whoever it is, they shall pay the price for their act of folly. Indeed, with their lives.
Part 6.
The Crimson Battlefront was quick to act upon Priscilla's orders, just as their master commanded them. The soldiers, all heavily equipped in red, had gathered at the basin of the Tenril River, in order to proceed with their investigation of 3 other villages. As a result, it was discovered that 2 villages were also affected by the parasitic creatures, and in return for procuring the safety of the women and children, the Crimson Battlefront ended up disposing of the infected men. Al, even with your Yang sword, you can't save the men like how you did with the women and children. Priscilla, the Yang sword is not omnipotent. Even if it is able to eradicate the foreign substance that is inside of a body, it cannot fill in the hole that is left behind. If I were to put this in your words, there is no salvation for a brain that has been turned into sponge. Receiving Priscilla's answer, Al drew back his chin with an I see. In other words, the parasitic creatures took root in the brains of the men, and had gradually obtained control over their bodies. Since their brains were the first thing that would be taken over, their memories and actions would become more vague and unclear as time passed. Once again, what was going on matched up with the attestations that the young man had given at the Barriel mansion. Al, so, about the dude who came to the mansion. Without eating anything, he ran out of the village the moment he saw the guys sewing back their limbs, right? I hope he didn't drink any water. Yay, the women were being extremely careful about that, because they were focused on getting him out safely. They gave him boiled water and emergency food, keeping him away from the source of infection. Al, they did a great job. Seems like he's loved by them. Al whistled, impressed by the lengths the women went to keep the young man safe. Thanks to their efforts, he was unharmed, and the girl who risked her life for him was also safe, thanks to Priscilla. The village was in ruins, having lost all its men except for one, but they didn't lose everything. Perhaps it was possible to rebuild it. Al, now, if we were able to avoid an ending with a bad aftertaste because of this and that. What are you thinking, princess, staring intently at the map like that? Priscilla, do you not think that something is strange? There are 4 villages near the basin of the Tenril River, however, only 3 out of 4 have been affected by zombies. There is one village that has remained unaffected by it, inside the village chief's house that was now uninhabited, located at the center of Coffleton. Priscilla made a query at Al while gazing down at the map on the table. In response, Al muttered out an ah. Al, maybe they were fasting, without drinking any water as well? I heard that there's a sort of religion that does those things. They say that no eating, no drinking, and no entertainment is a symbol of their belief. Priscilla, if that is the reason why they were unaffected, then that shall be a different problem. What I have made speculations on is the water flow. The village that remained unaffected is located upstream. Pointing at the map, Priscilla divided the upper stream and the lower stream of the river, by how they were unaffected and affected respectively. Water naturally flows downwards, so if someone had poisoned it, the area affected would be below that point, which would be the lower stream. Yay, because of that, I went to investigate the connection between Coffleton and the unaffected village. Opening the door of the village chief's house, Ye made an appearance, her red hair flowing behind her. Carrying herself with an easygoing attitude, she shoved herself between Al and Priscilla, marking a spot on the map. Al, what's the mark for? Yay, it's to show where the watermill is. The forest at the riverside has wood harvested from it, and the wood is brought downstream on a boat. I think the watermill was mainly used for grinding, but something smells fishy. Priscilla, it functions as a cover for their scheme, I see. With Priscilla's response hitting the nail on its head, Ye gave her a nod. Seeing that the two had already come to a conclusion on the matter, Al raised his right arm with a weight. Al, sorry to interrupt your excitement, with schemes and covers and whatnot. But, you guys already decided on what this whole thing is? As something like a terrorist attack, Priscilla, naturally. No matter how slow-witted one could be, what would they think of this, if this is anything other than a man-made crisis? Do not lower yourself to an imbecile, Al. Surely you understand the disparity between a jester and a fool? Al, the one who makes others laugh, and the one who gets laughed at. Priscilla, the former shows great promise. However, the latter will remain worthless to the end, unless it is actively sought after. By no means shall you forget this. Despite saying those words in such a forbidding manner, with Priscilla being Priscilla, it was rather thoughtful of her. However, Al had a personal reason for why the current situation didn't sit well with him. The zombie outbreak that occurred in the Bariel domain was something he had never even heard of. Yay, Al Summer, your face is scary. It's not a good thing, so smile. Al, you can't even see my face, Al grunted in response to Ye's encouragement. It was as if she thought he was sulking from his conversation with Priscilla. After that, he pointed his finger at the map that Priscilla was glaring at, and, Al, if the water mill is a cover-up, then does that mean you're suspecting its manager, or the wood traders for being responsible? Priscilla, it is reasonable to start placing down suspicions from there. Yay, who is their representative? Yay, Edda Rayfast. They say that she's a heroic woman who unifies the rowdy men. There's a chance that Mistress can get along with her. Without having to look back at her memories, Ye answered in a flash. Priscilla, Setting aside the possibility of that one getting along with me, we have cleared the first requirement, Priscilla replied, closing an eye. Hearing her response, Al and Ye both tilted their heads with the requirement. Seeing the reaction of her companions, Priscilla loosened the edges of her red lips. Priscilla, yes, every one of those zombies were male. If we consider what was set as a precedent, then there is a low possibility of that heroic woman or whatever being sponge-brained. Al, I see. That's true, Priscilla, however, Priscilla cut herself off mid-sentence and closed her other eye as well. Finding her silence uncomfortable, Al attempted to call out to her, but, Priscilla, forget it. Everything shall come after I see the truth for myself. It was very characteristic of Priscilla to decide everything by herself before letting him speak. She was definitely aware of Al's concerns, but she never gave it a single glance. Despite that, when she realized that Al wasn't following her as she started walking, Priscilla, what are you doing, Al? Follow behind me like a domesticated dog. She would say something like that as if it was obvious, which Al couldn't help but find irresistible. Al, should I really lick those pale feet like a dog, while breathing heavily? Yay, wag. Al Summer is really off-putting. As he tried to follow after Priscilla, who walked ahead with her head high, the red-haired maid next to him expressed her disgust. Touching the metal fittings of his helmet, Al started longing to see the pink-haired, young butler that was not present.
Part 7.
Al's first impression of Edda Rayfast was more of her being iron-blooded instead of a heroic woman. Under her dark skin, the blood that streamed through her veins could be colored pitch black, instead of the normal red. A plump body, thick limbs, and heavy makeup that seemed more fixated on valor more so than beauty, along with a fur coat over an outfit that looked like it could burst apart at any moment. With one look, it could be garnered that she had a different aesthetic sense compared to the average person. Edda, I see that you're Priscilla Bariel Summer, Edda said, gazing down at Priscilla who was seated on a chair in the reception room. Moreover, the reason why Edda was looking downwards at her was not because of the height of the chair, but their different physiques. Priscilla was not a short woman, but Edda's was so tall that even Al had to angle his head up to the point that his neck hurt. Though, even Priscilla couldn't possibly become angry at, "Priscilla, lower your head. Who do you think I am? Al, you're going to get mad at that? Even if it's a matter of height. Isn't there nothing that could be done about this? Priscilla, what is there to cause an uproar about? Considering that this one has the audacity to look down on me, it shall be solved within a moment if this one becomes half buried under the floor. My displeasure has been incurred, all because there was not even a single mechanism that opens the floor. Al, people won't make large-scale preparations on that level, even if they used the maybe-driving mindset. If you aren't half buried under the floor, you might make an important guest feel displeased with you. What a tough life, Priscilla, how vociferous. This time, you are being unbearably bothersome about this and that. Al, that's. I'm worried about you." Al felt his words stick in his throat as Priscilla buried herself deeper into the couch, whilst placing her hands over her ears. If he told her that he was worried, then he was telling the truth. However, Al's concerns were not enough of a reason for Priscilla to stop in her tracks. Beside him, he could see Ye let out a sigh. Sure enough, Priscilla sniffed disdainfully with a humph, then turned back around to face Edda. "Priscilla, I only came here for one thing. Either your lumber industry, or the watermill that you manage, are being used by someone to orchestrate their heinous scheme. Have you realized, Edda, a heinous scheme? I see. Yea, starting with Coffleton, 3 villages that are located at the basin of the Tenril River have already been affected by it. Have any of your employees claimed to feel sick, Edda Summer?" Edda raised her thick brows upon having the problem brought to attention by Priscilla, and placed a worm-like finger on her lips upon being questioned by Ye. Her reaction was an indication that she knew something about the ordeal. "That isn't a good look to make in front of Priscilla," was what Al would have told her if he was in his usual state of mind, but he was currently not calm enough to be considerate for Edda. Because of that, he pretended that he wasn't aware that Edda's cloudy eyes would be the cause of Priscilla's irritation. "Priscilla, you have a face that says that you have an idea of what is happening. Edda, this is between you and me." Possibly having resigned herself to the fact that she would not be able to escape from Priscilla's investigation, Edda replied immediately. Perhaps that was one of her abilities, to be able to select the most optimal choice for her survival. If she had played dumb one more time, Priscilla would have unsparingly drawn her yang sword against her. And so, the potential of a scene of bloodshed was avoided, and Al was relieved that the situation didn't have to come down to there. It had resulted in his carelessness. Al realized that his footing was becoming wobbly, unable to stand firmly. Looking down at his feet, he understood why. The floor had disappeared. Altogether with the carpet, sofa, and even the reception table, the floor opened downwards. Al's body began falling down into the underground area, pulled by the force of gravity. "Al, Prince, yay, I'm sorry, Al Summer." The moment he started falling, Al attempted to call out to Priscilla, but was flipped over by a force that struck his shoulder. Glancing at what hit him, Al saw that the person who had kicked his shoulder in order to grab onto the ceiling was Ye. Being put in the same predicament as him, she narrowly avoided plummeting down into the pitch-black space by grabbing hold of the lights on the ceiling. In return, Al lost his balance, and it became clear that he wouldn't be able to circumvent his fall. So, he instead searched for the figure that he had to check up on out of the corner of his eyes, his line of sight intermingling with the red, crimson girl's gaze. Al then started to fall, falling down. Falling below the surface with his body turned upside down. Letting out a soundless cry, Al remained helpless as he plunged down into the deep, dense shadows.
Part 8.
Under the floor was a vast, fathomless darkness. The floor that had opened without any warning had engulfed everything into its chasm, which should be referred to as an abyss. Into the darkness went the red carpet, large sofa, reception table, the cups that still had tea in them, and one man with a jet-black helmet whose delayed judgment made him unable to react in time. Watching the man disappear into the bottom of the void with a lasting cry, the Scarlet Woman who had been plotted against Priscilla Barriel narrowed her beautiful eyes that were equal to the exquisiteness of a jewel. "Edda, careless, you were. Priscilla, careless, you say?" Behind her, A voice called out towards the nape of Priscilla's neck as her gaze lingered on the abyss, and she turned around to face the owner of the voice. Curling her blood-colored lips was Edda, the person who had conspired against Priscilla and her companions. Priscilla stared unflinchingly at her ugly smile without a single change to her expression. Priscilla, directing your hostility towards me in such a straightforward manner is something that I cannot imagine as the act of a sane being. Edda, really? Priscilla, on top of that, you have weighed that I was careless with your capacity. You are deserving of 10,000 deaths. Edda, really? Even with Priscilla confirming her culpability, Edda's body trembled with a delight that was out of place. Her dark skin continuing to quiver with every passing moment, it only served to heighten Priscilla's displeasure. Unhesitatingly, Priscilla reached out her hand towards empty space, aiming to draw out her crimson, treasured sword that utilized the sky as its sheath. However, mistress, at the same time with the exclamation, obsidian blades whizzed through the air, and the sound of gouged flesh rang across the room. What flew across the room were kunai, knives that originated from the west, and the one who threw it was Ye, who had evaded her fall by borrowing Al's shoulder as a platform. The kunai she threw had penetrated the foreheads of the enemy, the two men who appeared from the hidden door on the wall behind Edda. The length of the blades weren't long, but it was enough to seize their lives by impaling their heads and stirring up their brain matter. As Edda received one of the blades on the center of her neck, she wasn't an exception either. Yay, oops. Mistress, I'm sorry. I carelessly did it out of reflex. Nimbly landing on her feet next to Priscilla, Ye apologized for bringing down the three using her knives. Hearing those words, Priscilla lowered her arm, and, Priscilla, I do not mind. Although I would have preferred to execute them myself, it does not hold enough value for me to slight the loyalty of my chamberlain. More importantly, Ye, from this height, Al Summer might. Wow, I can't even see the bottom of it. With Priscilla crossing her arms beside her, Ye frowned as she peered into the abyss. It was no wonder she made that face, since the bottom of the dark chasm was completely imperceptible. Ye dropped one of her kunai down the hole to test the depth, but there was no sound of it hitting the ground. Considering how deep it was, and the fact that it was a trap made specifically to lure in enemies, there was no telling what other traps were lying around the very bottom. All in all, there was no other option but to believe that Al's chances of surviving were close to non-existent. Yay, mistress, this is extremely hard to say, but I believe that Al Summer passed. Priscilla, What was it that made you think of launching an ambush against me? Yay, mistress. Having finished analyzing the trap and giving the mournful news of Al, Ye tilted her head questioningly. Priscilla stared ahead at the kunai impaled Edda and her subordinates, concentrating on their bodies as if she was studying their intent, with not a single hint of concern for Al's well-being. She was being indifferent to the point that it was as if Al's entire existence had been consigned to oblivion. Yay, mistress, I don't think Al Summer would be able to rest in peace, being treated like that. Priscilla, fool. Neither I nor you have the time to spare on such trifles. To begin with, do you not think that it is strange? Yea, strange, Priscilla, if the objective was to bring harm upon me, then why was the trap activated when I moved away from the abyss? Their aim would have been off the mark. If so, that is illogical. Ye tightened her cheeks, picking up on the feeling that something was wrong after hearing Priscilla's indication. She was correct. Priscilla was originally standing above the abyss. If the Priscilla camp the heart of the camp, Priscilla, had been targeted, there would be no meaning to the trap if she wasn't the one who fell in. Despite that, the enemy had purposely triggered the trap in a way that wouldn't drag Priscilla into it. That's, because I didn't want to leave any injuries on your body. Priscilla and Ye raised their heads upon hearing the low, reverberating voice. In their line of sight, a gigantic figure was slowly getting back on her feet, with the kunai still stuck in her neck. Her thick, worm-like fingers grabbed onto the hilt of the blade, and pulled it out roughly. She acted as if she had no regard for the human body, but strangely, there was no blood flowing out of the wound. The reason for that could be easily deduced, in light of everything that happened so far. Yay, do you happen to be a living corpse? Edda, I take offense to being called something like that. I'm just moving around in a bloodless body. Edda or Edda the living corpse widened her grisly smile, answering Ye's question in an annoyingly nonchalant manner. There was no hint of pain in her expression, and she would be no different than a living human with a monstrous face if she didn't have the wound on her neck. However, a gaping hole in her neck was in plain sight, and looking at it would make one doubt their sense of reality. Facing the living corpse, Ye casually moved in front of Priscilla to defend her, but without acknowledging her chamberlain's thoughtfulness, Priscilla directed a scornful sniff at Edda. "Priscilla, I have the same opinion as you. Living corpse does not sound appealing to me. You shall call yourself a zombie from now on." "Yay, wait, mistress, is now the time for that?" "Priscilla, no matter the time or situation, I shall always be who I am. If that shall be bent, then that is not me. Although, I suppose this is an unforeseen situation." Priscilla usually spoke as if she was all-seeing, but this time, she made it clear that she was unable to foresee what was currently going on. When Ye expressed her surprise against that, Priscilla shrugged her pale, thin shoulders. "Priscilla, it could be simply put as hideous if those were creatures that are only able to mimic a human, as well as to speak. However, the state of these zombies are undoubtedly not limited to that. You said that you did not want to leave any injuries on my body, correct?" "Edda, yep, I did." "Priscilla, I see. In other words, your next objective is my body." Edda's dark red lips twisted further into a more sinister smile. The next moment, the two dead men on the ground sprung up, and they immediately threw themselves at Ye and Priscilla. Obviously, the men were also living corpses. Ye used her long legs to kick out at one man who made a move to grab her, and she took hold of the other man's collar, skillfully throwing him over her back. As a result of her endeavor, the two living corpses vanished into the bottom of the abyss. "Despite that, Edda, I still have more men, you know. You thought you could run from me? Yay, uck." The moment Edda let out a roar of laughter, every door in the room slammed open at all once. Reinforcements appeared from the entrance and hidden doors, and more dropped down from the attic of the open ceiling. Ye strained her cheeks as she counted her remaining kunai, noting the overwhelming number of men that stood before her. "Yay, we seem to be at a laughably big disadvantage. Mistress, do you have any good ideas for what to do?" "Priscilla, the chamberlain is the one that must present their ideas to me. Is depending on me the first thing you must do? How shameful." "Yay, but, mistress." Ye struck the approaching living corpses with her kunai, slicing through their arms, legs, and necks as she cut down enemy after enemy, piling up dead bodies that carried a rotten smell. However, no matter how many times she knocked them down, the bodies would continue to stand back up. Seeing Ye being gradually driven into a corner, Priscilla sighed. "Priscilla, Ye, leave me and draw back. Then, you may search for Al." "Ye, eh? Mistress, I thought you had forgotten about Al Summer's existence." "Priscilla, all I said was I had no time to spare on such trifles. Do not grumble about such a foolish thing. If it is for your escape, then I shall wrench open the opportunity to do so. You ought to be honored. You shall kneel." "Yea, kneel?" Eek. Right after Priscilla's display of arrogance, a crimson flash swept across horizontally. Ye instinctively kneeled down, Priscilla's treasured sword ruthlessly sailing above her head in a wide arc. Fire erupted from the red gleam of the sword, and the living corpses that were in its trajectory floundered around as they turned into ash. "Priscilla, you shall go." "Yea, mistress, please stay safe." Having already made her way to the ceiling with a leap, Ye slid into the attic. Like that, she quickly withdrew from the reception room that became a battlefield, and Priscilla was left alone in the area. "Priscilla, After seeing Ye's escape through, Priscilla swung her crimson sword 3 more times, enveloping the unscrupulous fellows that attempted to come close in flames. However, "Edda, seems like the end's drawing near." "Priscilla, indeed," Edda sneered, having watched her men's desperate fight earlier in a relaxed manner. She was looking at the treasured sword in Priscilla's hand, its brilliance having clouded over and there being no remaining traces of the force of its shimmering flames. "Priscilla, the sun has been obscured, it seems. As usual, this sword does not abide by my will." Having said that, Priscilla carelessly tossed her sword in the air. The sword decapitated a living corpse that stood behind her, and dematerialized as if it had been sucked in by the sky. The sword that had the sky as its sheath had returned to the sky. The living corpses surrounded Priscilla, who was now empty-handed. "Edda, I don't mean to hurt you. Will you behave well and follow us?" "Priscilla, do not let those filth lay a finger on me. Also, you shall entertain me courteously." Crossing her arms, Priscilla lifted her bountiful chest as if she was showing it off, and made such demands. Hearing that, Edda raised her brows, and her face broke into a grin. The heroic woman continued whilst grinning, "Edda, I don't dislike your haughtiness. It's most suitable for the Paradise's administrator."
Part 9.
At the bottom of the deep, dark abyss, Al was losing hope in his sewage-covered self. "Al, is this for real? I sure did a good job surviving, hey." Grimacing at the unsteady ground, as well as the lukewarm feel of the ground against his hands, Al wiped his dirtied hands against his pants and scraped out the mud that got into the gaps in his helmet. While he was doing that, Al clicked his tongue at the unlit darkness as he glanced at his surroundings. He momentarily paused the removal of mud from his helmet, taking out a white stone from one of the pouches near his stomach. It was a lugmite ore, which was a special stone that emitted a glow upon being subjected to external impact. It had different characteristics compared to mana stones, and it was a convenient object due to being able to act as a light source without any fire. Knocking the lugmite against his helmet, a dim, white glow illuminated the area. Then, looking at the first thing that entered his sight, Al uttered an yuck. "Al, it wasn't like I thought I was lucky for not dying, but..." He was at the bottom of the abyss, which was the trap in the reception room of the Rayfast mansion, laid out below the floors with a mechanism that allowed them to be opened. The enemy's aim was obviously the deaths of those who fell into the trap, but Al had managed to avoid the worst outcome. That didn't mean that he dodged the trap coolly and put himself out of harm's way. Al only survived because he landed right on top of a cushion, the impact of his fall being absorbed by it. However, the cushion was, Al, a mountain of rotting bodies. What an awful smell. Hoping that what was clogging the gaps and metal fittings on his helmet was actually mud, Al made a face at the fates of the humans that had acted as a cushion for him. The number of bodies did not fall within 10, nor 20. They were most likely a part of the workers of the lumber industry that Edda managed. Each of the bodies had their clothes on them, and none of their accessories had been taken, so they were definitely not killed for money. The bodies were crudely dealt with, but the reason why the corpses were corpses was probably not a simple matter. Al, that means, the fact that living corpses don't last for long is a flaw. If it's like this, then the living corpse business will probably not succeed. It's full of elements that the high-so-upper class would hate, anyway. Since she made the first move, it was guaranteed that Edda Rayfast was connected with the living corpses. Considering her influence and financial assets, there was also a good chance that she was the mastermind. If that was the case, then the safety of Priscilla, who had been left above, would be a cause for concern. She made sure to stay there even if it meant kicking me down, so she's probably doing her job properly. Even without any help, Princess might figure it out on her own, but... As Al observed his surroundings, relying on the light of the lugmite ore, he sensed a strange presence that came from the direction of the mountain of bodies. Turning his face, Al tilted his light source. Immediately, his gaze met with hollow eye sockets, and he took an intuitive step back. "Al, you are, With a long, drawn-out moan of the dead, the mangled body squirmed around. It stretched out its arms, revealing raw bone underneath its stripped flesh, and lunged at Al to drag him down into the pit of hell. Al gulped in a breath with a momentary delay to his reaction. Unable to meet the attack in time, the corpse extended its fingers to puncture his skin. Al, The next moment, a kunai fell from above, pitilessly boring through the dead man's rotten head. At that time, Al had no way of knowing that the kunai was the one that Ye had dropped from the reception room, in order to measure the depth of the abyss. Saved by an incomprehensible streak of luck, Al had accomplished a narrow escape from death. Perhaps even the moving corpses differed in quality, as the body became motionless once its head was broken through. Its rotten arm dropped back to its side, and the body collapsed without a single cry, falling completely silent. However, Al had only gotten away from the plight that the first body had put him in. Al, you're kidding me. In front of the murmuring Al, the mountain of bodies convulsed, and he could tell that its putrid meat and rotten fluids were soaking through the muddy ground. Wondering about the true identity of the muddy ground, Al backed off slowly as an acrid stench filled his nostrils. He was trying to prevent himself from drawing the attention of that as much as he could. Despite his attempts in the face of death, it was thwarted by intruders that appeared in an unexpected way. Al, wag? As if making a fool out of Al's effort to make sure he didn't provoke the corpses, the intruders crashed right on top of the mountain of bodies, splattering their surroundings with an enormous amount of rotten flesh. What was shown in the white light of the lugmite was something foreign that fell from above, yet again, but it was two humans this time. If Al had seen it correctly, one of the bodies had a kunai sticking out from its head. That meant their killer was Ye. It was evidence that she was having a hard battle on the floor above, but it was also poor timing. Al, whoa, impacted by the falling men, larger movements started to form within the mountain of bodies that had been convulsing earlier. Its motions were rightly increasing in size, and it was as if the mountain itself was beginning to move. Masses of human bodies that far exceeded the numbers of 10 and 20 melded into each other, forming a single entity that was grotesque to the point that it no longer looked like a human. Having assembled into a huge lump of living corpses, it started rolling towards Al. Al, this has gotta be a joke. Turning his back on the impending cluster of corpses, Al started running with all of his might. Out of everything he had experienced in his life, the unsteadiness of the ground and the low visibility of this place was among the worst experiences that he ever had. Running desperately for his life to this extent was something he hadn't done since he had escaped from the Colosseum of the Gladiator Island during the night. But back then, his pursuers were humans no matter how terrifying they were, yet what was chasing him right now was of a completely different nature. Al, the sewers? A wastewater treatment plant? Does this place have an exit? Zori were not compatible with filthy water, but Al was able to carry on running without tripping on his feet. Since the wide passage continued straight ahead, there were no other passages he could swerve into in order to let the combination of bodies pass by. Such a strategy was unusable in this place. It was probably not very pragmatic to keep being on the run without a map, nor a sliver of knowledge about where the exit was. Running away was worth it if the mess of corpses were able to be out of breath, but Al had no chance of winning a stamina showdown against a bunch of dead bodies that already ended their activities of life. To add to that, Al, is this for real? In front of him, multiple silhouettes came into sight. They stuck their hands out, staggering on their feet in the orthodox style of zombies. Thinking that perhaps the speaking zombies he saw back at Coffleton were a rare type, Al ground his teeth upon seeing the unintelligent zombies make their entry. Of course, there was no way that the zombies that blocked off the passage wouldn't notice Al and the mishmash of bodies, as they were scattering the rotten smell as they went, while their feet splashed against the muddy ground. Zombies at the front gate, a cluster of corpses at the back gate. Being grabbed by one of the zombies would put him at the risk of death, but before that, being crushed underneath the mass of bodies would also put his life in danger. In this place, there wasn't a single reliable ally that could come to rescue Al from his crisis. To save his own life, he had to exert himself to the best of his ability. Using everything that he had, Al, I don't know the width or the length of this place. I'm at a disadvantage, but can I wrap it in? The encounter with the jumble of corpses that were closing in on him, and the zombies that were approaching him before his eyes. Al desperately paid attention to the surrounding terrain, biting down on his lip underneath his helmet. Then, along with his determination, he barked out, Al, goddammit. Expand, domain. The moment he shouted, the space around Al briefly contorted as if it was twisted off, curling and sagging, as if receiving the intervention of an inconceivable being, like the disproportionate feeling of looking into the world through bubbles that floated on the water's surface, a bizarre scene such as that seeped through the area that was filled to the brim with a thick fetidness. Then.
Part 10.
Edda, right here, we're planning to create our maker's paradise. Saying that, Edda peered into Priscilla's face from where she was sitting on the floor, right in front of the Crimson Girl. Receiving her gaze, Priscilla rested her chin on her hand whilst crossing her legs in an elegant fashion, murmuring out a "Ha, Priscilla, your colloquy fails to capture my interest in any way. How are you going to regain lost ground from here, Edda? How cold? But, the consistency in your attitude's valuable. You're arrogant towards everyone no matter who they are, and you also have the necessary power and position. Definitely ideal, I'd say, Priscilla, I see. I am able to discern this conspiracy for the most part. Edda, oh, really? Seemingly unaware of leaking any information of the sort, Edda tilted her thick neck to the side. Directing a wary look at the action that lacked a single speck of charmingness, Priscilla quietly glanced outside of the window. Inside Edda Rayfast's mansion, Priscilla was confined to the furthermost room. Her hands were unshackled, and it was also possible for her to walk around the room freely. She was on the 3rd floor, but she also had the option of escaping out of the window. However, there were watchful eyes stationed outside of the room, and she could see more than 10 living corpses guarding the area just by taking one look at the window. The sun had already been obscured once. After it had gone down, it would take time for it to rise up again. Even Priscilla didn't think that she would be able to escape from the crowd of corpses while she was empty-handed. To start with, she absolutely refused the idea of trying to escape from the mass of the deceased by the sweat of her brow. Priscilla, when the time shall come for me to exit this mansion, I have already decided that I will be triumphantly walking out from the front. Edda, such bold words. But, you might be able to grant that wish, because, Priscilla, because you are scheming to take over my head as well as my body, using those vile, parasitic creatures. Edda, Fufu. Receiving an incinerating gaze through narrowed, crimson eyes, Edda's large body trembled. With fingers that were too big for the transparent glass she held, she set it down on the table. Poured inside of the glass was an amber liquid. Judging by its faint fragrance, Priscilla could tell that it was an alcoholic beverage of excellent quality. However, it did not entice her tongue. The glass was put there after their conversation. Considering what they had spoken about, there was no way that it was just an ordinary drink. Edda, you're clever. So you don't need any explanations, right, Priscilla? The villages that surround the Tenril River have been dirtied by the asinine poison that you have sprinkled into it. Perhaps the liquor over here is tainted by the same substance, am I correct? What a dull, uninteresting lot. Edda, I'm sorry. To make up for it, I made your drink a special one. A special drink. It was rare for the preliminary mark to ring hollow in such a way against Priscilla. Thinking about the villages that used the water from the Tenril River, as well as the grave situation where the villagers from said villages turned into living corpses one by one, there was no room left to doubt the idea that the parasites, the cause of the fiasco, entered the body through water that had been ingested from the river. Priscilla had been aware of that since her time at Coffleton village, but there was only one problem. Previously, it was believed that the parasitic creatures' sole targets were adult men, and that they were also harmless against women and children. The reason for why it was controlling Edda Rayfast, being after Priscilla's body as its next objective, was because, Priscilla, among specific breeds of insects and rats, there are certain species that prefer to build a nest as a group. What is required to maintain order within the nest? The answer is clear, even if they are wild animals that only have a minuscule dot of a brain. Edda, huh? What's it, Priscilla? A queen. Considering the current situation as entertaining, Priscilla smiled for the first time since she entered the mansion. Creatures that make their nests in groups, prioritizing reproduction and the expansion of their nests, will put a queen at the very top of their society. The idea that females were essential to breeding children seemed to be invariable logic, no matter the size of the living creatures. Not a king, but a queen. It was an odd way of existing, but it coincided with the current situation. That meant, Priscilla, apparently, you hideous parasites are able to establish the logic of a queen, despite there being no life in your bodies. For all of you, reproduction should be a dream within a dream. Edda, who knows? The speed of our growth is very fast. At first, we may be corpses that are only able to move once the brains are rotted, but that leaves hosts that have their intellect and thought process intact. If that goes on, we'll be able to attain control over our hosts while they're fully alive. Priscilla, are you saying that sometime in the future, you would create natural-born zombies? What a repulsive era of millenarianism that you are scheming, really. That is the paradise that you all desire, and you are telling me to become its administrator? Edda, I won't let you refuse. You know it's no use even if you did, right? The maid you let escape isn't caught yet, but that's just a matter of time, too. Ye was having a difficult time making her escape even as of now, but the corpses that were stationed around the mansion and its surroundings were guarding the area strictly. The forest that circled the mansion was especially a field where Edda's subordinates, who worked for her lumber industry, were able to move around as they pleased. Even with Ye's swiftness, she would be at a disadvantage. As Priscilla analyzed the situation calmly, Edda laughed at her. Edda, muff you foo. You don't have to be so unwilling. Even as I'm saying this, it's not like I'm a completely different person. It's just that I changed the order of my priorities. Priscilla, do not spout such nonsense. Death, that is what it is called. Edda, foo. Blowing out a raw-smelling breath from her thick lips, Edda produced a low, guttural sound as she laughed. Hearing the ugly noise, Priscilla knitted her shapely eyebrows. After that, she gently reached for the glass with her thin, pale fingers. Priscilla, and then, Edda, you gulped it down, without even trying to drink it secretly. Obedient, aren't you? As Priscilla tipped the amber-colored glass of liquor over, licking her lips, a look of surprise crossed Edda's face. Perhaps, she had a hard time believing that Priscilla had complied with her orders without putting up a fight. However, there were no indications of any cheap tricks that had been played. Priscilla didn't splash the contents of the glass against the floor, but she drank the whole thing instead. That meant that the same parasites that were in Edda had also entered Priscilla's body. Edda, sooner or later, the effects will start to appear slowly. Once it does, we should be able to have a more friendly chat. Let's also talk about our maker. Priscilla, that name again, huh? It seems that you are quite devoted to them. Edda, well, that's because our maker is our maker. Our real parents. To be exact, our maker is the incentive that allowed us to be reborn. To make a paradise where our maker could be at peace, that is the mission that has been bestowed upon us. Priscilla, building a paradise for your maker, I see. How boundlessly dull. Priscilla shrugged her shoulders at Edda, who spoke with a sinister tone of reverence in her voice, whilst bending down to face the crimson girl. Hostility briefly flitted across Edda's eyes upon hearing Priscilla's choice of words, but it disappeared as soon as it came. As Priscilla rested her chin on her hand once again, Edda stood up in front of her, staring down at her beautiful face. Edda, no matter what you say, it doesn't sound convincing at all after you ran from us, scared of how we would treat you. It'll be quite the sight, seeing someone as arrogant as you being committed to serving our maker. Priscilla, that sadistic taste of yours is not so bad for an unsightly woman such as yourself. I have finally found a point of compromise for Ye's nonsense. There is a chance that I am able to get along with you, is what that one had said. Edda, really? Well then, does it mean that you feel like making friends with me now? Priscilla, do not utter such foolish things. I shall execute you by my hand. It will be worth seeing you quiver your fattened, bulging body, begging for your life to be spared whilst shedding those tears. So, how is that? If I am able to derive pleasure from that, surely you will agree with my previous words? Priscilla loosened her lips with a graceful smile. To be exceptionally beautiful, that was her true essence. For the first time, Edda shivered as if she had been terror-stricken by Priscilla's existence. Almost as if she couldn't believe that she was actually scared of her, she gave her own palm a glance. Edda's body had already been reformed, setting her free from the suffering and hardships of this world. Despite that, what was the tremor that passed through her body just now? Through narrowed eyes, Priscilla gazed up at Edda, who was supposed to be at an advantage compared to her. She pulled out her fan from her cleavage, using it to cover her mouth. Then, she said it. Her signature phrase, as well as the rationale that was absolute, one that she believed without a doubt. That is, Priscilla, you shall keep this in mind. This world is made to be convenient to myself, Edda. Priscilla, therefore, no matter how much effort is put into your endeavors, you will meet your end, scorched into mere cinders. In the meantime, you shall spend your time wisely at the most. Until the performance of my jester arrives. Saying that, Priscilla directed the tip of her fan at the floor, and said nothing more. There was no need to say anything more than that.
Part 11.
When Ye Tenzin stepped into the underground area, it was after everything was over. Yay, here, the smell is going to twist my nose. Rotten flesh blended together with wastewater, creating a putrid stench that made Ye grimace. It was as if her consciousness was growing faint just by taking a whiff of the smell. Since she was able to see in the dark quite well, Ye didn't have any light sources with her. However, the sight that emerged within the darkness looked like a painting from hell, something that made Ye regret receiving her training to improve her night vision. Dead bodies, and more dead bodies. Looking towards her left, and looking towards her right, the area was full of piles of corpses, and more corpses. Reflecting back on her life, seeing dead bodies was hardly a rare occurrence for her, but looking at this many bodies with their dignity as people stripped from them was a sight that wasn't seen often. Unlike torture and humiliation, as if they were judged as worthless and tossed aside, the mountains of piteous lives that met their tragic ends were strewn about on the ground. Yea, aren't I quite loyal, obeying mistress's orders in this situation? But rare possibilities only occur once in 10,000 times, so Ye came here to look for her co-worker who fell in, but nevertheless, the chances of his survival were probably slim. She already had a difficult time coming to the underground space, but she had gotten fed up with its depth once she had actually climbed down the abyss. Stretching down from the mansion's floor for dozens of meters, it was at a height that even Ye could fall to her death from. Creating such an area underneath the floor was an idea that made Ye harbor a strong dislike for it, just by thinking about it. The bodies that laid all over the place were most likely precious labor forces, those who were involved with the hard work it took to build the trap. Living corpses wouldn't ever complain about anything, so it could be said that they were the right people in the right place, in the meaning of digging their own graves. Yay, well, as a co-worker, I guess he fails in terms of his attentiveness to his appearance. In that sense, Al-Summer was equal to the living corpses, but his cleanliness was a wee bit better than them. Because of that, the scales would barely tip in favor of how much Ye liked Al as a co-worker. To be honest, however, she was unimpressed with the fair match that was going on between the comparison between Al and the living corpses. Putting me side by side with zombies results in a fair match, huh? I won't be happy even if I win a match like that. Yay, whoa. Walking along the edge of the passage in order to keep the damage from the rotten fluid to a minimum to her very best, Ye raised her face, startled upon hearing the voice that came out of nowhere, and was further surprised by the figure that came into view in the darkness, with a gait that was like that of a ghost. The one whose feet made disgusting splashes along the floor as he came was, Yay, Al-Summer, is that you? Is it all right for you to come near me? Have you accidentally turned into a living corpse? Al, I've been bitten and scratched all over. There's no symptoms right now that I'm aware of, but I can't just say that it's nothing. I know that there are a lot of cases that go, one scratch, and it's over. Yay, based on what me and mistresses worked out, you won't be infected through your wounds. Unless you didn't drink any water. To be honest, I wouldn't want to associate with anyone who would drink any sort of water from this environment, even if they were a living corpse. Al, I'm also the type that survived on muddy water, but if I'm given the option to drink the water here, then it's a no thank you. Saying that, the one-armed man who wore a jet black helmet slipped out of the darkness. He was in an appalling state, being covered by filth from head to toe, but one glance at him was enough to tell that none of his wounds were fatal. Neither did he have any wounds that resulted from his fall. Yay, can Al-Summer fly? I heard that the Margrave of the West is good at doing that. Al, I guess I'm also called a jester, but it's a different type compared to that kind of jester. I just happened to be lucky. Right as I fell, there was a cushion made out of a mountain of bodies. Yay, do you really call that being lucky? Al, it's cheap as long as you don't die. That's a way to justify things, coming from my hometown. Once they had their conversation, Al leaned against the wall and flumped down onto the ground. They were exchanging banter, but Ye could see that Al was deeply exhausted. Several hours had passed since he fell into the abyss, and if he was continuously moving around, uncertain of whether he would live or die, that was only natural. First and foremost, yea, these heaps of bodies around us that were living corpses. Did you? If her speculation was correct, then some of the bodies were the labor force that existed to create this underground area, and they were sacrifices as well. However, there were also quite a few bodies that seemed to be used in other ways, making Ye feel like there was a large difference between the conditions of the bodies. Long story short, it appeared that the intellect possessing living corpses at the mansion on the surface and Coffleton village, and the walking corpses that didn't possess the same intellect, were mingling with one another. What those corpses had in common were lacerations that they received from a blade that was large in width. I'm tired. Good job surviving, me. Really, good job, and thanks to God. Yea. Looking at the helmeted Al letting out a long, weary sigh from the side, Ye narrowed her eyes, assuming that the disastrous spectacle in this underground area was what Al had carried out on his own. Then Ye would word it as unexpected. If Ye would appraise Al honestly, then he was a man who wasn't that skilled. He was second-rate as a swordsman, but since one of his arms was lost, he would be second-rate and a half at best even as a warrior. It was also hard to think that he excelled in continuous battles, so she had a hard time finding what he was the best at doing. In reality, she perceived him to be a mood-maker. Ye thought that the most she could expect from him was for him to be Priscilla's shield when push came to shove. To think that he was able to annihilate a horde of living corpses, even if they weren't in the best condition. Yea, the power of love, is it? Al, don't say something so scary. So, how's Princess? Is she safe? Yea, it's about that, but things aren't looking too good. Al, shrugging her shoulders against Al's voice of skepticism, Ye explained the events that had occurred after he had fallen into the abyss, Etta Rayfast's conspiracy, and the entire area that was controlled by a swarm of living corpses. About how Priscilla had been captured by the enemy, and how Ye and Al were the only ones who were in the position to move freely. Yea, we're outnumbered nonetheless. If it's just me, then there's a possibility that I can do my best to escape, but by the time I return with reinforcements, Al, there's a high chance that the parasites have already gone inside Princess, you're saying. Yea, if that happens, then there's no use in doing that. Is what I think. What should we do? She added, asking for Al's opinion. However, there weren't many measures that they were able to take. Against the horde of living corpses, they only had 2 cards in their deck. Al's survival was a fortunate occasion, but it was hard to think that it was a move that would change the situation drastically, and Ye's attention was focused outside the mansion on the red-adorned Crimson battlefront, who were patrolling the villages near the Tenril River, stamping out the living corpses that were there. If they were called over, then some living corpses would equal to nothing in their eyes. The problem was the likelihood of Priscilla turning into a puppet, with her consciousness seized by the parasites while the Crimson battlefront was still making their way towards them. Against that, Ye could only think of a baseless countermeasure that consisted of counting on Priscilla's aberrantly strong sense of self. Relying on that in order to make their move was something that Ye felt more reluctant to do than actually doing it. Ignoring Ye's complicated feelings within her mind, Al, why did you come to look for me? If you were planning to save Princess, then your best bet would be to sneak out and call the Crimson battlefront. Yea. I had the same thought at first. To be honest, I couldn't count on you being alive after that fall, so. But, Mistress, Al, Princess did what? Yea, told me to look for you. She said that she had no time to spare on such trifles, so I thought she had quite a lot of faith in you. Al Summer? Ye remembered Priscilla's bold order that was given to her, right as she withdrew from the battlefield. Honestly, it was a bad move that she would see no value in obeying if it wasn't Priscilla's idea. All in all, it didn't turn out to be in vain because Al was alive, but Ye had no idea of how this was going to connect to whatever would happen in the future. Having that kind of view on the situation, Ye glanced at Al, sensing a shift in the air around him. Yea, Al Summer? Al, slowly getting up from his previous position where he was slumped down on the ground with his head lowered, Al fiddled with the metal fittings on his helmet and made them clang. It was a small and weak metallic sound. The gesture was something that Al showed often, but, just for this one moment, it gave Ye a different impression than usual. Al, she really did it? That woman. His murmur contained an echo of enjoyment, and it added further to Ye's puzzlement. Then, in front of the bewildered Ye, Al began walking in a way that seemed like he was dragging his feet. Where he was headed for was the direction in which Ye came from, which was the pathway that led back to the mansion on the surface. Ye, Al Summer, there are a lot of enemy sands up there. Al, Ye, don't you realize it? Ye, huh? Realize what? Al, do you think that princess would make a boring move that'll turn out to be fruitless? A stupid move that people like you and me can recognize as a bad move. I don't think she would take any measures like that. Ye, that's. Her words becoming stuck in her throat from what Al pointed out, Ye started to question her own actions. He was right. She herself had thought that looking for Al wasn't worth it. Despite that, why did she follow Priscilla's orders? That is because, Al, after all, the world operates in a way that makes it convenient for Princess. So, if Priscilla had chosen Al for the occasion, then it was the best move that one could make in this situation. Drawing out his blue dragon sword from the back of his waist, Al began walking on the path that led to the surface, with traces of irritation in his steps. Behind him, Ye followed along hurriedly, asking him, "What are you planning to do?" "Ye, there are loads of enemy sands out there, you know?" "Al Summer, are you planning to win against them 100-on-1? "Al, worse than 100-on-1, it's dangerous for me even if it's 2-on-1. I know what you're capable of. But, I've been in plenty of circumstances like that." "Yay, plenty of 100-on-1s, you're saying?" "Al, circumstances where I'm outnumbered, I'm saying. Fighting 100-on-1 and there being 100 enemies are two different things." "Yay, Al, there's no chance of winning if it's 100-on-1, but what if it's 101-on-1s? Of course, I'll be at a disadvantage, but don't you think that there might be a small chance, like 1 out of 10,000? That was the correct way to attack when the enemy had greater numbers, but it was a preposterous pipe dream, considering the difference in strength between the two and the living corpses. However, the man in front of Ye was speaking with an air of confidence, almost as if he had the experience of having shot down a star in the past, about the possibility that was tiny as a hole that was made by a needle. "Ye, 1 out of 10,000 is as good as nothing. To add to that, if it's that possibility, then I've already used it up. I thought that the possibility of Al Summer's survival was 1 out of 10,000, so, Al, if it comes to that, then it means that I have to draw out a possibility that's 1 out of 20,000. I'm a boy, too, so this fires me up. As long as the possibility isn't 0, I'll wrench it open." In front of the conversing two, a spiral staircase that connects to the surface came into view. They would be at the surface if they climbed up the stairs, but what was waiting for them was a hell of hordes of living corpses that was worse than hell. "Al, while I'm being loud, you should slip out of the mansion and go and pick up the Crimson Battlefront. Either way, the parasitized people all gotta be eradicated." "Yay, are you serious about doing this?" "Al, don't make me repeat myself. I don't want to be out of breath during my signature phrase." Saying that, Al took his first step on the spiral staircase. Knowing that making any more attempts to stop him would be tactless, Ye gave him a respectful bow. "Ye, I was quite fond of you and Mistress. Al, don't say something like you're bidding us farewell. It'll bring bad luck." Finishing their brief exchange, Ye quickly passed by Al as she began running. It was unknown what kind of hidden trick Al had up his sleeve. Ye decided that she would consider his feelings, even if what he put up was simply a life-risking act of bravado. Calling over the Crimson Battlefront, she would let them wipe out the living corpses, in order to exterminate the source of the stench that was twisting her nose, without letting them out of the dirty garden that they were in. Like that, behind her, Ye caught the last traces of Al's murmuring voice as she ran ahead. Those were words that Ye could not grasp the meaning of at all. Expand domain, begin thought experiment.
Part 12.
Decapitating the living corpse in front of him, without turning around, he thrust his sword into the torso of the enemy that appeared behind him. Forcefully twisting his sword around, the rotten body's torso was torn off easily, and it rolled out onto the floor. Next, and then next, Al continued to cut down the bodies one after one. Some time had passed since he started doing that, as the mansion was overflowing with dead bodies. The bodies were only walking around in the first place, so he could claim that all he did was remove the abnormality out of the normality. In one way or another, a corpse was a corpse, and that was how it should be. However, if it came down to that, then Al would start to become unsure of what he was doing. Al, it's not like I'm exorcising them, and it's also not like I'm putting their souls to rest either. It's an operation where every single corpse that went into the blind alley of fate is mowed down. It's way too ironic, considering that it's me who's doing that. Or, perhaps even that was something that Priscilla had expected to happen, all in the palm of her hand. The holder of crimson eyes that seemed as if they saw through everything. Even Al couldn't possibly fathom the inner feelings within her bountiful chest. Yet, Priscilla, who would never weigh her own destiny on anything else but her own scales, had chosen Al to shift the ongoing deadlock on the board, and there was no way to change the truth that she indeed chose him to do that. There was also no way to change the truth of Al's stupidity, as he was putting in his utmost effort all because of that. Al, now, killing and killing, I got 134 of them. That yay, she only made a rough estimation, didn't she? This is way more than 100 on one. But, soon, our patience is going to reach our limit. Al, wiping the rotten fluid that was smeared against his blue dragon sword on the curtains, Al turned around to see a giant shadow that stood at the end of the passage. A humongous frame that was hard to refer as human-sized, ugly facial features, and reaching his eardrums was a voice that got on his nerves. Al, this is between you and me, but shouldn't you rename yourself from heroic woman to filth? Edda, how dare you do this? Do you know how much trouble I went through to ready this number of corpses? Everyone was a part of the precious labor force for the paradise. Al, trouble? All you did was make them drink water. Don't make a face like you've gone through the same hardships as a marathon runner, when you were only standing at the water supply station. Building a paradise, or whatever it was, Al had no interest in what the kingpin of the living corpses had to say. Unfortunately, he didn't remember being disciplined to listen to the villain's speech quietly. Because of that, Al, I'll kill you, and take Princess back home. Soon, in all seriousness, I'm gonna lick those pale, long feet. Edda, a vulgar person, aren't you? I won't let you get in the way of our mission. Edda laughed malevolently at Al, who pointed his blue dragon sword at her whilst speaking about his obscene wishes. The next moment, Edda's steely oil-colored skin swelled up, and aberrant bumps began thrashing around underneath her tight, stretched-out clothes. Just like that, her clothes were torn apart, revealing skin that Al wasn't happy to see, and gruesome abominations made their appearance. That was an aggregation of multiple living corpses that Edda had taken into her heavy build. Hands and feet were sticking out all over her body in an unnatural fashion, and the faces of the dead that were letting out silent screams were attached to places such as her stomach and back. Feeling repulsed at the anomalous presence that she gave off, Al curled his lip inside of his helmet, clicking his tongue. Al, gross. Edda, I'll also make you a part of me, and use you as an ingredient to take that woman down a peg or two. After that's done, with that woman's status and beauty, a paradise is going to be built on the ground. Al, HK, bouncing her body with great force, Edda's gigantic frame closed in on Al with a jump that ignored her heavyweightedness. What made that possible was perhaps because she was reusing the unnatural muscular strength of the bodies that she had taken in. Flying through the air while showering her surroundings with fetid fluids that were pouring out from all over her body, she was undoubtedly the worst enemy to face. If one free-willed mind was attached to the cluster of corpses that he came across underground, it was going to turn out like that, was what Al had discovered just now. Against the monster that had piled up disaster upon disaster, turning into what would be the definition of hideous, Al made a massive leap that propelled himself backwards. Then, in his mind, what he envisioned was not the approaching enemy, but the damsel in distress, who was at a place beyond where Al and Edda were standing. Ah, for crying out loud, why do I have to go through a terrible experience like this? That was unmistakably because he was unfortunate enough to come across her. Therefore, Edda, sailing through the air, the giant corpse advanced on Al as it flung its foul spit around and scattered the acrid stench that was coming from it, reaching out towards him with its countless hands. Seeing that with his very own eyes, Al gave a light shrug of his shoulders, and, Al, for me and you, the stars were not in our favor.
Part 13.
Priscilla, you are late, Al. How long must you make me wait? Even irreverence has its limits. Al, are those really the words to say to the brave, laudable me, who finally arrived here after finishing a fierce battle? Having opened the door with a muddy, slush-covered appearance, Al's shoulders sagged upon receiving an unkind welcome. Staring at Al, the girl who was recrossing her legs in an elegant fashion was Priscilla, who had been taking on the role of the damsel in distress at the innermost place of the mansion. However, she gave no sign of being affected by the insecure position she was put in, undeviating from her usual arrogance, which was very much like Priscilla Barriel. Al, I'm an utter idiot, too, being relieved by that rather than getting fed up. Priscilla, it is inevitable for men to kneel down before me. There is no need to feel ashamed about that. If anything, you ought to understand the logic that it is only natural. So, what about that discourteous, insolent ringleader of the living corpses? Al, I had a hard time fighting it, as if I seriously only had a chance to win with a possibility of 1 in 10,000, but... well, I thought that you would want to do it yourself. I made sure that it couldn't move and left it there. Priscilla, that is good. I shall praise you for that, Priscilla said, leisurely standing up from her seat and passing by Al with a confident air. Tilting his neck at her gallant form, he let out a small sigh and chased after her back, leaving the furthermost room in the mansion. After moving ahead for a while, they arrived at Priscilla, humph. Really, you have been reduced to a laughable state. Below Priscilla's feet lay what was once Edda Rayfast, left on the ground. It was in a condition that could be described with one word: horrendous. The body that was a mishmash of corpses was already not a pretty sight, but the rotten flesh that was all over its body had been shaved off, and it was similar in appearance to a caterpillar with its torn-off limbs. Al had described Edda's thick fingers as caterpillars, but it wasn't even a funny story if the main body was turned into that. Priscilla, I was planning to watch you sob disgracefully as you pleaded for your life, and satisfy myself with that, however. That is not going to happen with this wretched state that you are in. Edda, you... what was that? Everything. Just like that. Becoming a living corpse, she had separated the hardships of this world from herself. That was Edda had boasted, but she was shaking her head, the roots of her teeth chattering out of the fear that she felt towards the things that had happened to her. Knowing that Edda's words were directed towards Al, who had reduced her to that state, Priscilla didn't answer her, drawing out her beautiful, crimson sword from midair. Unchanging from when it had been put away once, the bright red brilliance hadn't returned to its blade, but... Priscilla, even supposing that the sun is obscured, the smouldering heat will not die out. Your death will not be a painless one, but I have said that I will scorch you into mere cinders. I shall not go back on my word. Here, you shall dream of your paradise and turn into ashes, Edda, at any rate. You will. Same as me. Perhaps something was on her mind, as she was about to voice her refusal to accept her defeat, until the tip of the sword sank into the face. Forced into the choice of silence, Edda's wide-eyed face began glowing a weak red color, and she eventually combusted into flames. Just like that, the flames that made Edda its starting point spread across the floor and the walls, its range continuing to expand as it begged for wood to make into fuel, in order to become a great fire that would incinerate the mansion itself. Al, princess, is nothing happening to your body? Staring at the growing fire, Al made his question towards Priscilla's back. It was difficult to imagine that Edda and the living corpses did nothing to her while she was being held prisoner by them. As far as he saw, there were no traces of her being physically harmed, and her attitude was also that of the usual her. Because of that, he didn't want to think that the living corpse-creating parasites had made their way even inside of Priscilla. But, Al, they did something to you, didn't they? For example, Priscilla, is it about the boorish treatment that exists to modify my impeccable body into a zombie? Al, receiving Priscilla's gaze, Al instinctively fell silent. It was still all right if her scarlet eyes contained anger. However, What dwelled within her gaze was the emotion of a lull in the sea that he couldn't read the details of. Towards Al, perplexed by her windless stare, Priscilla loosened her lips with a breath of air. Priscilla, do not worry. Supposing that the foreign matter is eroding me from within, surely you are aware of the method that is used to remove it? Al, what do you mean by a method to remove? Faced by the smiling Priscilla, Al recalled what had happened back in Coffleton village. Priscilla had kissed a girl who had been infected by the same parasite, forcefully dragging the parasitic tentacle out of her body. If it was that method, then it would be possible to remove the parasite that had taken root in the host's body. However, Al, neither Ye or Schultz-chan are here, though? You also burnt the only person of the same gender that was left as well. Priscilla, fool. Even if a portion remained unburnt, for instance, who would entrust my lips to lips that are rotten in two meanings? Enough is enough, you shall prepare yourself. Is it none of your concern, no matter what will happen to me? Al, no, that's. Al took a step back as Priscilla fixed him with a glare. Despite that, the distance that was created between them was easily closed by Priscilla's confident strides, and soon, Al found himself cornered into a wall. Al, why? Wait, princess. See, the mansion's burning right now, so now's not the time for. Priscilla, you have gallantly risked your life for me. I shall grant you your reward for that. Do not move. Al shook his head slowly, but Priscilla acted like his refusal meant nothing to her. Touching him, who was covered in head to toe in filth that was disgusting to even brush against, her pale fingers hooked the rim of his helmet, and then, Priscilla, no matter how many times I see it, you have an unsightly look in your eyes. Continuing her words, the shrill sound of a black helmet hitting the floor echoed throughout the burning mansion.
Part 14.
Yea, as expected of Mistress. Mistress herself is safe, as well as her ally. It's quite fantastic, Priscilla, that is to be expected. However, words of praise are pleasant. You shall praise me as much as you would like. Yea, ha. Back at Priscilla's private room in the Bariel mansion, Ye was prostrating before Priscilla, having been ordered to take care of her nails. Already, the scheme of Edda Rayfast, the person who had been in the command of the living corpses, was broken, so all they had to do was to sweep up the living corpses that remained in the surrounding area, and settle the situation for once and for all. From the beginning until the end, Priscilla had resolved nearly every tale with her own strength. Of course, even Ye prided herself on how she had given a small handful of her assistance for that, but it was really only a small handful. Everything had played out in the palm of Priscilla's hand, and had ended without being able to get out of there. Everything, including Edda and the living corpses, as well as Ye and Al's fierce struggle. That was just a little frightening. Priscilla, your hands are idle. Ye, oops, I'm sorry, mistress. I was just thinking about things for a little while. Priscilla, I see. It is irreverent to be absorbed in thought while you are taking care of me. What have you thought about? Ye, you see, it's that. It was when I brought back the Crimson Battlefront, and met up with Mistress and Al Summer in front of the burning mansion. At that time, didn't Al Summer seem rather restless? No, if it said that he's always restless, then that's true, but, of course, it could be thought that the exhilaration from making it out alive from a life-or-death crisis still remained inside of him. He had survived against an enormous number of living corpses, after all. Really, he had passed through the narrow possibility of 1 out of 10,000. Truth be told, when she found the two in front of the mansion, Ye was confident that it was a moment that surprised her the most in her whole life. She almost wanted to compliment herself for not showing that on her face. It was just that Ye had the feeling that Al was perceiving something incomprehensible, something that couldn't be defined as exhilaration. Priscilla, that is because that one is an idiotic man. Priscilla's reply seemed like an answer to Ye's suspicions, but it actually wasn't. It was an airy answer that didn't pry into the core of the topic, but it didn't seem like she would be speaking about it any further. Ye, there, mistress. I'm done with your treatment. As usual, your nails are unbelievably beautiful. With the feeling that she was wrapped in smoke, without any way to voice her suspicions any further, Ye finished working on Priscilla's nails. Her words weren't flattery, as Priscilla's innate beauty really did shine through even her fingertips. Her whole body, no matter which part, was the personification of beauty. It was to the extent that it was unbelievable, even as a fellow woman. Yay, should I call for Schultz-chan right now? He could share your bed as always. Priscilla, not tonight. Perhaps I am doing this just in case, but I will wait and see how it will go for the night. I had burnt up the foreign matter that had gone inside me from the glass of liquor. However, there is no need to terrorize him. Yay, I see, the living corpses were too ambitious, trying to steal your body like that. With the power of the Crimson Sword, Priscilla was able to burn whatever she wanted to burn at her will. It was only natural that whatever substance that entered her body was immediately dealt with. It wasn't hard to imagine her promptly setting the parasite ablaze, right after she had put the glass that she had been given to her lips in an ostentatious display. Yay, well then, mistress, you must be tired, so I will be leaving now. Even Al Summer looked exhausted, so please rest well. Priscilla, MHM. Yay, you have done well. Right as Ye was about to leave the room after performing a bow, Priscilla spoke her words of acknowledgement. Receiving that, Ye lowered her head even further, and disappeared in front of her master without leaving behind a single footstep. Afterwards, Ye realized with a sudden jolt that this was the first time that Priscilla had acknowledged her efforts in such a natural manner. It meant that Priscilla had recognized what Ye did today as a large, difficult task. Even Ye, having been demanded to take up a role that was unworthy for a simple chamberlain, had fatigue and the sense of fulfillment piling up on her at an equal rate. If she were to put it honestly, today was the worst day, but it wasn't bad. Since the day she began working at the Barriel mansion under Priscilla, Ye thought that today was the most interesting day that she ever had. Ye, really, I have an unlucky nature, don't I? But, opening and closing her palms, Ye blew out a small sigh. It was fun. It wasn't bad. It wasn't as if she didn't think, if things continued to go like this, that was why? That's enough. In the midst of the depths of night, where the moon was concealed by the clouds and the insects' songs could not be heard, someone called out to Ye from behind. Halting in her tracks, holding her breath, and stopping the trembling within her heart, Ye turned around. She recognized the voice. Yet, she didn't remember the voice sounding so frigid. Along with that, feeling apprehensive of the current situation to begin with, Ye put on her usual smile. Ye, is it Al Summer? What are you doing outside during midnight? Al, Ye, I'm sure you're tired today, so I thought you were taking a rest. Or, is it that you couldn't sleep because you were overwrought, since you cut down too many people? If that's so, I think you shouldn't be there. If it's the other chamberlains, then you'll be forgiven even if you did some things with them, but any further than that, Al, is Princess's room. Yeah, I know. Interrupted by a quiet tone of voice, Ye shut her mouth for a moment. Then, she put up the same smile. Not yet. It wasn't over yet. He didn't know yet. She could still save the situation. She could still make sure that these memorable days wouldn't end yet. Yay, even more so if you understand. Of course, if you would sneak into a woman's bedroom, she'll be a beautiful one, but doing that to mistress is really difficult, as you would expect. If you'd like, then should I accompany you? You see, with your hard work today, maybe you look a little more handsome to me, just a bit. Al, you talk a lot when you're troubled. But, that's no use. I'll create no openings. Yay, Al, I'll say it just once more. Beyond this area is Princess's room. What are you going there for during a night like this? Receiving the words of Al, who seemed convinced about the matter, Ye dropped her shoulders with bated breath. With a slow shake of her head, her tied red hair swayed callously in the night. So, this was it, was the conclusion that the determined Ye had drawn from her heart. Her attempt to deceive him had no effect, so he probably wouldn't listen to her excuses either. Al knew everything. Yay, I thought I was quite perfect at hiding it, so how did you find out? Al, don't worry, you were perfect at it. It's just that I'm the one who's cheating, playing foul a little and all, though, it was an answer that I didn't want to believe. Yay, as ever, your words are difficult, and they're not understandable to an uneducated person like me. With a carefree attitude, Al was the man that acted like a jester, and he always positioned himself by Priscilla as if he was keeping her safe. Ye thought of it as him being cautious of her at all times, as well as being considerate towards her. Whether that was hostility that came from deducing Ye's aim, or whether it came from something else, was what Ye didn't know herself. With the reason remaining unclear, the relationship between Ye and Al would come to an end. Ye, if you could overlook this situation, I won't cause any harm to you, Al Summer. Al, maybe I would have listened to that, if there wasn't anything that would be taken in return. Ye, is that so? Yes, that's a shame. But, if you say so. Lifting down the corners of her eyebrows, Ye acted as if she was going to talk about a different topic while lashing out her arm. Instantaneously, the thrown blade flew straight towards Al, stabbing him in the chest. Al, duh. Ye, I didn't hate you, Al Summer. As Al let out a grunt of pain as he collapsed, the blade having gouged itself into his heart, Ye spoke to him with words that failed to serve as consolation. Seeing Al's death to the end, caused by the unfaltering strike that she had hit him with, Ye exhaled a short breath and turned her back on him, attempting to get back to her advancement towards Priscilla's room. Priscilla was extremely intuitive, so there wasn't a chance that she would sleep through the whole ordeal. The possibility of her waking up from the dispute between Al and Ye was still there. Ye was ashamed to say it, but she would be out of moves to make if Priscilla did wake up. That's why, before that, Ye, I wanted to carry out my task, though. With the blue dragon sword held against the back of her neck from behind, Ye dropped her kunai in a low-spirited manner. Giving a fleeting glance backwards, she could see the man of the jet-black helmet standing behind her. The kunai that was supposed to have been stabbed into his chest fell onto the ground, and Ye saw that the tip of the blade had buried itself into the piece of wood that Al had hidden in the chest area of his clothes. That was as if he knew where Ye was aiming for when she had thrown the kunai. Al, didn't I tell you? I cheated. The timing where you'll kill me, too, and everything. Ye, I don't understand. If I said that I would give up, will you stop? Al, in case you were really planning to come over to our side, then I've considered it. Until this morning, Ye knew that she was asking for too much when she directed the question at him, but what Al returned to her while sounding pained was a strange answer. He said that he would have arrived at a different conclusion if it was until this morning. He said that he might have considered Ye's suggestion. However, there was nothing to be troubled about now. What triggered it was, Al, on top of the rotten, muddy mountain of corpses, Priscilla chose me. That's why I will choose her back. Ye Tenzen. You are the woman who will kill Priscilla. I won't let you kill her twice. Ye, I haven't succeeded even once, though. Al, yeah, you're right. To set that in stone, I'll nip what is uncertain in the bud. Hearing Al's words that were beyond her comprehension, Ye felt fear settle into her skin. That wasn't towards the hostility that would make one imagine their death. The feeling was directed towards the abnormal fixation that Al harbored, something that was unfathomable to other people. It was not because of her sense of duty, nor was it because it was her job. Trusting her own instinct and skill, Ye thought that she needed to kill this man. Al, sorry. Me and you, we're just Unlu, no. Ye, in an instant, Ye twisted her body, aiming to strike her opponent's windpipe with a blade that jumped out of her sleeve. During that moment, right as the glimmering, black blade was about to reach its target, a voice was heard. A voice. Al, the stars were not in our favor. The next day, one chamberlain from the Bariel mansion resigned from their job because of familial matters. It was an extremely rude way to quit their job, as the chamberlain hadn't spoken a single word to her master, Priscilla, about it. However, when Priscilla had received the report, all she said was, I see, and she said no more than that. The chamberlain who quit was distressed by the emergency that had occurred a day before in the Bariel domain, was what the steel-helmeted man who served Priscilla had been gossiping about. The other chamberlains who were all her colleagues had sympathized strongly with her, but as they were buried under the work that their busy days brought forth, their interest in their former colleague had started fading away. Only the young, pink-haired butler would continue to regret being unable to say farewell. As a matter that was settled as that, her existence would be continued to be hidden by the shadows of history.
Part 15.
the unusual event in Bariel domain that had occurred, and had been settled. This was something such as a superfluous addition to that, at the bottom of the dark, humid area, there existed a small silhouette. The silhouette was a single girl who looked childlike in appearance, having been held captive in rigid restraints. In the midst of the darkness, the girl didn't move a single muscle, waiting quietly for the passing of time. Before long, mice began congregating under her, their scuffling faintly audible as they went. Although they were mice, if there were only one or two, then they were still cute. However, the number of mice in this area was out of the question, exceeding the likes of 100, 200, 1,000, and 2,000. The mice that surrounded the captive girl in the dark were tremendous in numbers, standing still without letting out a single cry. If this amount of mice gathered together, then they would be able to devour the likes of a young, little girl within minutes, without leaving any bones behind. However, the purpose of the mice's gathering was by no means because they viewed her as prey. If anything, it was the opposite. The mice did not view her as prey, but they were venerating her as something special. That was the loyalty that was directed towards a queen, what could only be established by the dominance of their instinct, which was an impossible evil that was brought to fruition. The mice, having lost their free will, gazed at the girl with eyes that were identical to a corpse, describing their devotion as something that was directed towards a queen, paled in comparison to what it actually was. Instead of it being aimed at a queen, it was more of something that was pointed towards a god, towards the maker that had created them, taking control over everything, using everything that we could use, and creating a paradise. We will welcome our maker, understanding the unexpected chaoticness of her dear children such as that. However, the girl continued to wait in silence for the passing of time. Until then, deliberation is required.